Chapter 239. After lunch, in order to create an opportunity for Yun Maxiao and Li Luo to interact, Yun Ruoyan suggested a game of chess. Li Mo had ordered Li Luo to take good care of Yun Ruoyan, and she obeyed Yun Ruoyan's request by setting up a chessboard in the side hall. Yun Ruoyan wanted Li Luo and Yun Maxiao to play, but Li Luo refused. Yun Ruoyan couldn't force the issue, so she could only play with Yun Maxiao herself. As Yun Ruoyan played, she glanced at Li Luo from time to time. Although Li Luo didn't speak, she would frown every time she made a wrong move. From this, Yun Ruoyan could tell that Li Luo was quite skilled at chess. For those who were skilled at chess, nothing was more painful than watching a lousy chess player play poorly. Yun Ruoyan purposely made a wrong move, then looked vexed. "Brother, this move doesn't count. I'll go again." Yun Ruoyan refused to play, and Yun Maxiao nodded in agreement. However, Yun Ruoyan pondered for a long time without making a move. "Sister Li Luo, where do you think I should play?" Yun Ruoyan took the initiative to ask Li Luo, and Li Luo finally made a move. "You can try there." Li Luo pointed at a spot. Once Li Luo started, she couldn't hold back. After Yun Ruoyan repeatedly asked if Li Luo could play there, Li Luo was finally forced into a position by Yun Ruoyan. Yun Maxiao was skilled at chess, but Li Luo wasn't bad either. The two of them were evenly matched on the board. In the end, Yun Maxiao won. "I lost," Li Luo sighed. Yun Ruoyan glared at her brother. "Why can't you go easy on her? Do you really want to win that badly?" Yun Maxiao ignored Yun Ruoyan's gaze and smiled at Li Luo. "Miss Li Luo, it's still early. Why don't we play another round?" "Sure." Unexpectedly, Li Luo agreed without hesitation. Yun Ruoyan didn't need to mediate the atmosphere any longer. The two of them played back and forth, and Yun Ruoyan became an outsider. By the time the second round ended, it was evening. "Young Master Yun, you're skilled at chess. I'm not your match. Sister Li Luo, you're already very impressive. My brother learned his chess skills from General Huang, and the fact that you were able to last so long against him shows that you're quite skilled." Yun Ruoyan stared at her brother once more. She felt that her brother had never been so calm before. He'd actually won 2 rounds in a row against the girl of his dreams. No wonder there was no sign of it yet. Yun Ruoyan wasn't particularly interested in chess. In her past life, she had only learned it to please Pei Zio. Although she was an expert, she lacked the heart to play chess, and she didn't care about winning or losing. That was why she felt that between losing a game of chess and making her sweetheart happy, the latter was more important. However, Yun Maxiao knew that one couldn't afford to concede in a match between experts. This was a form of respect for one's opponent. If he had conceded, Li Luo probably wouldn't have played a second round with him. Compared to Yun Maxiao's domineering style, Li Luo's style was steady and incisive. It was just that she was a little lacking in maturity and skill, which was why she had lost to Yun Maxiao. "Miss Li Luo, from whom did you learn chess?" Yun Maxiao asked. "His Highness sometimes plays chess with others, and I often watch from the sidelines, so I've learned a little," Li Luo replied. "I've never seen Li Mo play chess before." Yun Ruoyan pretended to be interested. "I'd like to play another round with him." "Oh Yin, would you like to play a round with me?" Li Mo's voice came from outside the hall. Li Mo walked in, his eyes glued to the door for a few days. "Li Mo, you're back early?" Yun Ruoyan looked at Li Mo in surprise. In the morning, Li Mo had told her that he wouldn't be back until late at night, but he was back so early in the evening. "Your Highness." Li Luo stood up from her seat and greeted Li Mo respectfully. "Slaughtering King." Yun Maxiao also stood up and bowed to Li Mo. Li Mo gestured for them to dispense with the formalities, then turned to Yun Ruoyan. Li Mo waved at Yun Ruoyan. "You're back just in time. We were just playing chess. My brother's really good, so why don't you two play?" Yun Ruoyan walked up to Li Mo and smiled. Yun Maxiao also looked at Li Mo expectantly. It was said that a person's character and personality could be discerned from their chess style, and Yun Maxiao was very much looking forward to playing against Li Mo. Li Mo glanced at Yun Maxiao. "Sure, but I don't have time today." Li Mo turned to Yun Ruoyan. "Yen, I'm here to bring you into the palace." Yun Ruoyan was a little surprised. "Why are you bringing me into the palace?" Li Mo didn't answer Yun Ruoyan's question. "Your father, official Yun, is also here." Since his father was also in the palace, he must have known that Li Mo had come to bring Yun Ruoyan into the palace. In that case, Yun Ruoyan would have no choice but to enter the palace. Li Mo turned back to Yun Maxiao. "There are quite a few scions from the noble families in the palace as well. Would you like to tag along?" Yun Maxiao had spent most of his time in the army, and he hadn't attended banquets or social gatherings. Now that he had returned from the army, however, it was important for him to attend more banquets held by the noble families. In fact, Yunlan had indeed brought Yun Maxiao to quite a few banquets and acquainted him with quite a few of the nobles. Since father hasn't asked me to go, I'm sure he has his reasons. I'd better not go, Yun Maxiao replied. Farewell. Li Mo nodded. Li Luo, please send young master Yun off. Li Luo sent Yun Maxiao off, and Li Mo brought Yun Ruoyan to the courtyard. Why did you suddenly return to bring me to the palace? Yun Ruoyan asked once more. The far-sighted king has adopted a son who insists on taking me as his master, so I told him that I have a disciple, Li Mo replied. When the far-sighted king heard this, he insisted on meeting Yun Ruoyan. Li Mo was about to refuse, but Yun Lan immediately agreed. After thinking for a moment, Li Mo decided that it wouldn't be a bad idea to introduce Yun Ruoyan to the royal family, so he personally came to fetch her. The winter weather was cold and the gardens weren't suitable for a banquet. As such, the banquet was held in Qingda Palace, where the emperor and his officials were invited. The palace guards all recognized Li Mo's sword aura, and Li Mo stopped right in front of Qingda Palace. Yun Ruoyan followed Li Mo into the great hall. As soon as the two of them entered, almost everyone's gazes landed on them. The two of them bowed to Li Xiu, who was seated on the dragon throne, and then to Yun Lan, who was seated on the throne. Yin don't stand on ceremony. Yun Lan smiled at Yun Ruoyan affectionately. Yun Lan was famous for being a smiling tiger, and it was rare to see him smile so coldly at home. But once he was outside, he immediately became smooth and slick, smiling from ear to ear. Yun Ruoyan was already used to this. However, when Yun Ruoyan turned around and revealed the fake birthmark on the right side of her face, Yun Lan's expression changed. Why aren't you wearing a veil? Yun Lan lowered his voice. Yun Ruoyan hadn't worn a veil during her stay at Kongming Academy, deliberately showing her ugly face to others. Apart from scaring away a few people who had nothing better to do, it was also a way for Yun Ruoyan to act in a fit of pique. A large part of her tragic fate in her past life had been because of her ugly face, and in this life she wanted to use that same ugly face to fight for a different fate. Lin Zainan and Yun Maxiao weren't surprised that Yun Ruoyan wasn't wearing a veil and deliberately revealing her birthmark. After all, they were only concerned about Yun Ruoyan herself. However, Yun Lan was more concerned about how much benefit this wife-born daughter of the Yun family could bring to him. Yun Ruoyan ignored Yun Lan and pretended not to hear him. Yun Lan was about to reprimand Yun Lan when an unfamiliar voice came from the seat of honor. Brother, is this your new disciple, the wife-born daughter of the Yun family, Yun Ruoyan? Yun Ruoyan looked toward the source of the voice and saw a short-bearded, middle-aged man sitting on the first seat to the left of the throne. He looked to be in his 40s, dressed in a purple-gold robe and had a warm smile on his face. This must be the far-sighted king Li Sheng, Yun Ruoyan thought. Just from his appearance alone he really does fit the image of a virtuous king. In fact, he had indeed fooled the common folk in Li Xiu. Yes, I am. Yun Lan stood up. Her appearance is indeed extraordinary. The far-sighted king's words were impeccable, and the officials who didn't know how to describe Yun Ruoyan's birthmark all nodded in agreement. This wasn't the first time that Li Xiu had seen Yun Ruoyan's ugly face, so he wasn't as surprised as the others. He smiled at Li Mo. I'd wanted to matchmake the two of you, but I didn't expect the two of you to become master and disciple. Both Li Mo and Yun Ruoyan smiled without saying a word. Yin come here. Li Mo sat down opposite Li Sheng and beckoned to Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan walked over and sat down by Li Mo's side. Suddenly Yun Ruoyan felt two sharp gazes on her. She frowned and met those two gazes head-on. The two gazes came from a youth who didn't look much older than Yun Ruoyan. He was dressed in a crimson brocade robe, and his back was straight as he sat by Li Sheng's side. Yun Ruoyan and the youth stared at each other for a few breaths, and the youth's gaze turned from sharp and judgmental to interested. Yun Ruoyan, however, looked away disinterestedly. Suddenly, the youth stood up and called out to Yun Ruoyan, "You're the slaughtering king's disciple?" "Yes, what of it?" Yun Ruoyan replied coolly. The youth raised an eyebrow. "I'd like to challenge you to a duel. Do you dare accept?" Chapter 240. You want to challenge me? The youth's sudden words surprised Yun Ruoyan as well as everyone else present. Everyone stopped their conversations and turned to look at Yun Ruoyan and the youth. "Yes, I want to challenge you," the youth replied seriously. "His Highness, the Slaughtering King, is someone I've always wanted to take as my master, but now that you've become his disciple, he's not willing to accept me anymore. I want to defeat you in front of the Slaughtering King and show him that I'm stronger than you." but I don't want to compete with you. Yun Ruoyan smiled at the youth. Although the youth looked a little older than Yun Ruoyan, at most 14 or 15 years of age, his temperament couldn't be compared to Yun Ruoyan's. Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but look at him as if he were a child. You're looking down on me? The youth was infuriated by Yun Ruoyan's gaze, and he clenched his fists tightly. Weihai. Don't be impudent. The far-sighted king called out to the youth, but the youth continued to stare at Yun Ruoyan stubbornly. The far-sighted king shook his head helplessly. This child is the orphan of one of my officers. That officer passed away not long ago during a mission to suppress bandits, so I took him in as my foster son. I didn't discipline him well enough and he's a little wild. Oh, so he's the orphan of a martyr? How heroic. The officials all sighed when they heard the far-sighted king's words. Compared to an ordinary foster son, the orphan of a martyr held a different status. Even the Emperor Li Xiu couldn't help but praise him. Good child. Tell me what you wish for and I'll do my best to fulfill it. Wei Hai doesn't have any other wishes than to become the slaughtering king's disciple, the youth replied. Brother. Li Xiu glanced at Li Mo, who didn't even look up from his cup of wine. Li Mo will only accept one disciple in this lifetime. Yun Ruoyan sat by the side, her lips curling up in a smile. She too didn't look up from her cup of wine. The relationship between master and disciple was indescribably harmonious, but at the same time, it felt as if there was something more between them than between master and disciple. But no one could tell where was more and where was less. Li Mo had always been a man of few words. Li Xiu helplessly said to the youth, "This wish is a little difficult. Try something else, such as a high-grade spiritual pill or a spiritual weapon. Godfather has all those things." He pointed at Yun Ruoyan. "Then have her spar with me." Li Xiu couldn't help but sigh inwardly. Everyone present could see how much Li Mo valued Yun Ruoyan. He couldn't force Li Mo, so naturally he couldn't force Li Mo's disciple either. However, he had already broken his promise to this child once. If he still couldn't fulfill this wish, how could he, the emperor, put his face in front of so many ministers? Li Xiu's slender eyes couldn't help but lose some of his emperor's authority, replaced by more of an ingratiating look. However, he wasn't looking at Li Mo, but at Yun Ruoyan. Miss Yun, in this emperor's opinion, you should compete with him and fulfill his wish. Wei Hai wasn't even a 5th-rank blade master, and Yun Ruoyan would have a crushing advantage over him. Everyone present could see this. As a result, they all urged Yun Ruoyan to compete with him. Even Yun Lan spoke up, and Yun Ruoyan had no choice but to stand up from her seat. "If you don't want to fight, don't force yourself. I'll take you away right now," Li Mo said. "No need, I'll just compete with him," Yun Ruoyan replied as she walked out of her seat. The youth also walked out of his seat. "This place is too small. Let's go outside." The Qingda Hall could host 500 ministers at a time, but there were less than 100 people in the hall. The hall was still quite spacious, and Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but wonder what the youth was planning. Before Yun Ruoyan could agree, the youth walked out of the hall, and Yun Ruoyan frowned as she followed. Li Mo stood up and walked out, and the far-sighted king and Emperor Li Xiu walked out of the hall one after the other, and the ministers all followed. This should be enough, right? Yun Ruoyan looked at the youth's back. The winter night air was chilly, and there were no stars in the sky. Yun Ruoyan channeled spiritual energy into her eyes and saw the youth slowly turn around. "All right, prepare for my next move." As he spoke, he charged at Yun Ruoyan like a gust of wind. To Yun Ruoyan's surprise, the youth's speed was far beyond his cultivation, but it was still a little lacking compared to Yun Ruoyan's. Yun Ruoyan channeled spiritual energy beneath her feet and leaped to the side. With Yun Ruoyan's current cultivation, she could leap 10 feet into the air. As soon as Yun Ruoyan landed, however, the youth immediately attacked again, and Yun Ruoyan leaped to the side again. The youth's cultivation wasn't high, but his speed seemed to be natural, and he didn't seem to know fatigue. Yun Ruoyan didn't want to hurt him, but she couldn't think of a way to stop him without hurting him. She couldn't use fireballs as the damage would be too great. Neither of them had any weapons, so she could only use spiritual energy to attack from a short distance. As expected of a descendant of a family of generals, this youth was able to beat the slaughtering king's disciple into a corner. Actually, it's not that the youth is strong, but that Miss Yun isn't skilled enough. Some of the officials who were close to the far-sighted king began to discuss the matter, but they kept their voices low because they were afraid of Li Mo. Not many of these officials had a high cultivation, and they could only make out the surface of the battle in the dark. Li Mo, Yun Lan, Li Xiu, and Li Shun could tell that, although Yun Ruoyan was dodging, she actually had the upper hand. Just then Yun Ruoyan grasped an opportunity. The youth had revealed an opening in his attack. Previously the youth's leg had been quickly retracted, but this time, it lingered in midair. Xuanhuan grabbed the youth's ankle, then channeled spiritual energy from her spiritual vortex and struck it. If she wasn't mistaken, the youth would suffer a bone-deep pain, and then he would lose the ability to fight. What shocked Xuanhuan, however, was that her spiritual energy didn't strike the youth's ankle. Instead, she felt a sharp pain in her fingers as if she had been bitten by something. The pain left as quickly as it came, and in an instant Xuanhuan's fingers turned numb. The numbness continued to spread from Xuanhuan's fingers to her arms, shoulders, and neck. "Mistress, you've been poisoned." Only then did Xuanhuan hear Xiuqiu's anxious voice. "I know," Xuanhuan replied. "Xiuqiu, what were you doing?" "I've been poisoned." Xuanhuan's tongue quickly grew numb. She saw the youth standing not far from her raised arm, and on his arm was a spider of the same color as his clothes. "A black fog spider," Xuanhuan exclaimed. She had seen Li Furong try to use such spiders to harm Lin Qingxue, but she had stabbed her to death with a dagger. The spider that Xuanhuan had stabbed to death was identical to the one on the youth's arm, but the color was different. That one was black while this one was crimson. "It's not a black mist spider," Xiuqiu emphasized. "It's a red mist spider, 10 times more venomous than a black mist spider. Mistress, hurry up and take an antidote." Xuanhuan felt her entire body go numb and even her tongue was numb. She forcefully retrieved an antidote from her pocket dimension and swallowed it. Only then did she manage to straighten her tongue. Then she pulled out the dagger from her pants and cut her finger, letting out the poisonous blood. The youth didn't stop Xuanhuan. The red mist spider's venom was too strong, and he clearly didn't want Xuanhuan to die so quickly. At this moment Xuanhuan felt as if she had failed miserably. She had a higher cultivation than the youth and she still had a chance of winning, but this youth, who was clearly weaker than her, had somehow managed to trick her. "What are you trying to do?" Xuanhuan asked the youth. "Why?" The youth's simple and honest expression was replaced by a sinister one. "Avenge my master," the young man said. "Your master? Who's your master?" Xuanhuan asked. "My master is the black-robed poison master, and Li Furong is my senior. Last night, I received news that both of them were killed by you and Liemo, and I swore that I'd kill both of you to avenge my master and senior." "So you're one of those two fellows' companions." Although Xuanhuan's tongue had been straightened, it was still difficult for her to speak. "Who gave you the news?" Xuanhuan knew that the informant had to be a spy within Kongming Academy. "Why did they stop fighting?" "That's right, they've stopped fighting," someone exclaimed. Xuanhuan and the youth had left the hall during their fight, and although the crowd could still see them clearly, they couldn't hear their conversation. "It looks like they're having a conversation. Don't tell me they've become friends?" Emperor Li Xiu chuckled. "If that's the case, that'd be great," the far-sighted king, Li Sheng, continued. "Miss Yun, I think you're a good girl." As he spoke, he turned to Liemo. "Official Yun, has your daughter been betrothed yet? If not, will she be betrothed to me?" Startled, Yunlan turned to look at Liemo, but Liemo's gaze was on Xuanhuan in the dark. Liemo was now Xuanhuan's master, and in the eyes of the Li Kingdom, a master was akin to a father. As a result, Yunlan had given up on the idea of betrothing Xuanhuan to Liemo. Xuanhuan and Liemo were now master and disciple, and this meant that the Yun family had formed an unbreakable bond with the slaughtering king. He wouldn't lose out. Now, however, another king was proposing marriage to him, and he didn't seem to mind Xuanhuan's appearance at all. Naturally, Yunlan would agree to it. However, he didn't dare agree immediately. According to the rules, he would have to consult Xuanhuan's master first. Both the far-sighted king and the emperor could see Yunlan's concerns, and they both turned to Liemo. "Brother, what do you think?" As soon as Li Xiu opened his mouth, a blue light flashed in Liemo's eyes, startling him. While Li Xiu was still in a daze, Liemo strode toward Xuanhuan. Chapter 241. Xuanhuan asked the youth who had sent him the message, but he didn't answer her immediately. Although Xuanhuan had already taken an antidote and let out some blood, the spider's venom had greatly weakened her cultivation, and she wouldn't be able to fight back for the time being. Xiuqiu could communicate with Liemo through her mental energy, but Xuanhuan couldn't. As a result, she didn't dare act rashly. If she opened her mouth to call for help, the red mist spider on the youth's arm would immediately bite her. In her weakened state, it would be almost impossible for her to dodge the spider's attack. "Mistress, if this continues, you'll be in danger," Xiuqiu exclaimed. "I'll inform Liemo." "Don't rush." Xuanhuan stopped Xiuqiu. Let me find out who the spy is. No, Liemo has already sensed that you're in danger and he's on his way here. Tell him to wait. Xuanhuan hurriedly shouted. Liemo was walking toward Xuanhuan when Xiuqiu's voice suddenly rang out in his mind, telling him not to come any closer and that Xuanhuan was trying to get information out of the youth. Liemo frowned and stopped in his tracks, his gaze fixed on the two men in the dark. If Xuanhuan was in any danger, he would be able to protect her in a timely manner. However, Liemo's actions fell into the youth's eyes. He turned to look at Liemo, his gaze sinister and smug. Then he took out a black object from his robes and raised it high above his head. Liemo was shocked by the youth's actions, and he rushed toward Xuanhuan like an arrow. Xuanhuan also saw the black scroll in the youth's hands. The black-robed man had used it before, so she recognized it as a teleportation scroll. Liemo had mentioned that teleportation scrolls were extremely rare, and she hadn't expected that the youth would have one. The youth threw the scroll on the ground, and a cloud of white smoke rose from it, enveloping both Xuanhuan and the youth. Xuanhuan felt the world spin around her and then she lost consciousness. Liemo's speed was as fast as lightning, but he was still a step too late. By the time he arrived, the two of them had already disappeared into the smoke. Liemo turned to the far-sighted king's side, grabbing the far-sighted king's collar with one hand and staring at him with a frosty gaze. What do you want? Liemo asked in a low voice. Brother, what are you doing? King Ming looked confused. Where did that brat take Yen? I don't know, the Ming king denied flatly. You don't know? Do you think nobody knows what you've done? Liemo lifted the far-sighted king up with all his might, and the far-sighted king, whose cultivation was much lower than Liemo's. Liemo, let go. Li Xiu said from the side. If there's anything, ask clearly. Don't be rash. None of the officials present had ever seen Liemo so angry, and no one dared to speak. Your Highness, just now my daughter and the young master suddenly disappeared together. If I'm not mistaken, the young master must have used a legendary teleportation scroll. Yunlan was the only one who spoke up because Xuanhuan was his daughter. Brother, let go of me first. I'll explain everything to you. Li Xing struggled. Liemo put the far-sighted king down. Tell me, where did you take Yen? The far-sighted king coughed a few times. That teleportation scroll indeed belongs to the far-sighted king's manor. I gave it to General Wei and he must have given it to his son. Wei Hai has a mischievous personality and he might just be joking. Send someone to look around. Cough cough. That's right, Liemo, don't be rash, Li Xiu advised. There are so many people here and I'm here as well. What could a young man like him possibly do? He's probably just throwing a tantrum and trying to play a joke on everyone. Li Xiu immediately ordered his eunuchs to send someone to search for Yen. Li Xing, as long as you don't cross my bottom line, I naturally won't interfere in your affairs, Liemo replied. You'd better have that brat bring Ruoyan back as soon as possible. Otherwise, no matter what you're planning, I'll make sure it's all for naught. Liemo's words were whispered into Li Xing's ear, and only the two of them could hear them. The innocent expression on Li Xing's face changed slightly. What I did? What could I possibly have done? Liemo, what are you talking about? Even if I'm really up to something, how would you know? Li Sheng had concealed his plans for rebellion for more than a decade, and he thought that he had done it flawlessly. If you don't want others to know, then don't do it. Li Mo's tone was cold and emotionless. All right. Li Sheng suddenly smiled. Since you know everything, I'll make things clear. The teleportation scroll that Wei Hai used is a mid-grade one, and it can teleport anyone within 250 kilometers. Li Mo's eyes were so cold that even Li Sheng felt a chill run down his spine. However, with Yun Ruoyan as his bargaining chip, he wasn't particularly afraid of Liemo. Li Sheng continued, I'm sure that my good foster son has already taken your good disciple and fled far away. No matter how capable you are, you won't be able to catch up to them. If you let me go now, I promise not to harm Yun Ruoyan's life. Otherwise, I can't guarantee anything. Do you know how much I hate it when people threaten me? Liemo was practically whispering into Li Sheng's ear, his tone so cold that it was frightening. The slaughtering king has always done as he pleases, so he naturally doesn't like to be controlled by others. However, I believe that even a dragon has a weakness, and if my guess is correct, this young lady of the Yun family is your weakness. Li Sheng forced himself to remain calm. Let me go and I'll bring back your good disciple. The choice is yours or a life and death struggle. However, it's not a loss for you to trade my life for a little girl's. Li Sheng dared to speak to Liemo in such a manner because he knew exactly how important Yun Ruoyan was to Liemo. Your Majesty, we've searched the vicinity, but there's no trace of young Master Wei or Miss Yun, a palace servant reported. Li Xiu frowned. Where could two half-grown children have gone? He couldn't help but look toward Li Mo and Li Sheng, only to see Li Mo lift Li Sheng up once more. Li Sheng's pale face turned red once more, and he looked as if he were on the verge of death. Just as Li Xiu was about to stop him, Li Mo lifted Li Sheng off the ground. I'll never submit to anyone, Li Mo exclaimed as a green sword appeared beneath his feet, and he sped off toward the horizon with Li Sheng in tow. Li Mo, where are you taking me? Li Sheng's face turned from red to white. We're brothers after all. We can talk things over. My surname isn't Li and I have nothing to do with the Li family. I'm sure you all know this. When Emperor Li imprisoned me in the palace, my master, the first elder of Kongming Academy, paid the price, so I don't owe you any favors. Li Mo stared ahead, his eyes cold and disdainful. Whether you want to rebel or rule over the Xuanhuan continent, none of that has anything to do with me. I've never wanted to interfere, but you shouldn't have set your sights on Kongming Academy, and even more so, you shouldn't have touched Yen despite knowing that she's my sore spot. I'll give you 3 days. If you don't return Xuanhuan to me in 3 days' time, not only will I destroy your manor, but I'll also personally take your life. Xuanhuan, who had been abducted, fainted after a moment of dizziness. In her stupor, she seemed to hear Lin Yuemei's voice. Yenur, come here. Let mom and dad see you. Xuanhuan slowly regained consciousness, but it wasn't Lin Yuemei's voice that echoed in her head, but Qiuqiu's. Mistress, wake up. Qiuqiu's tone was anxious. Qiuqiu. Xuanhuan sat up from the ground. Xuanhuan looked around her. She was lying in a cage, surrounded by a completely unfamiliar cave. Qiuqiu, where am I? How long have I been unconscious? Xuanhuan frowned, her face blank and wary. This is the far-sighted king's territory, 1,000 miles south of the capital, Qiuqiu replied. You've been unconscious for 2 days. Xuanhuan rubbed her forehead. She was still a little dizzy, but the numbness had mostly disappeared. You're awake. Just then, a person appeared at the entrance of the cave. It was the youth who had ambushed Xuanhuan Weihai. You've been poisoned by a red mist spider, but you've been able to neutralize the poison in just 2 days. What kind of monster are you? Weihai clicked his tongue in wonder. You should know that there's no antidote to my red mist spider's poison. Xuanhuan ignored Weihai's probing gaze and asked coldly, what do you want? I haven't decided yet. Weihai walked up to Xuanhuan's cage and sat down. That night, when I received news that you and Li Mo had killed my master and senior, I wanted nothing more than to tear you to shreds. Weihai said slowly. His face was filled with fierceness beyond his age. Then the fierceness turned into malice. But now I've changed my mind. I've discovered that your constitution is unusual, and I'd like to study you. Study me? Xuanhuan's expression changed. You wouldn't dare. Why wouldn't I? Weihai laughed sinisterly. Your godfather's still with Li Mo. If you dare hurt me, Li Mo won't let your godfather off. Heh, did you really take that old man's words seriously? Weihai laughed. Since you're still a young girl, I'll be merciful and tell you this. That old man wanted to rebel and he convinced my master to help him. I just didn't expect both my master and senior to die because of this. Weihai looked rather sad. Since they're both dead, there's no need for me to stay by that old man's side. I can do whatever I want and that old man can't stop me. In the slaughtering king's manor, the far-sighted king had already been locked up for 2 days. There's still one more day. Li Mo stood outside the far-sighted king's cell. If I don't see Xuanhuan by tomorrow, don't blame me for being merciless. Li Sheng had a bad premonition. Weihai had never been an obedient pawn, and after his master and senior sister's deaths, he had no more worries. Li Mo had sent word that if Weihai still treated him as his master, he would send Xuanhuan back. But it had been 2 days and he still hadn't returned. He must have run off with Xuanhuan. In truth, Li Sheng had only wanted to test Xuanhuan's position in Li Mo's heart. Although he had obtained the manual, Li Sheng still wasn't at ease. The title of the slaughtering king was far too intimidating. Just hearing it was enough to make a soldier's legs tremble in fear. Even with the divine dragon's art of war, Li Sheng was still worried. If only he could find a way to blackmail Li Mo without resorting to weapons. Because of his fear, Li Sheng had spent a great deal of effort to understand Li Mo. As a result, it wasn't hard to learn that Li Mo, who had always kept a distance from women, had only been interested in one woman, and that their relationship was extremely ambiguous. As a result, Li Sheng had shot himself in the foot. Li Sheng hadn't expected Li Mo's personality to be so stubborn. In Li Mo's words, he would rather die in glory than live in disgrace. Chapter 242. Your Highness. Su Bei walked in and reported to Li Mo, "We've searched the far-sighted king's manor as well as a few other far-sighted king's residences, but we haven't found any trace of Miss Yun." Li Mo clenched his fists tightly behind his back. The reason why he hadn't released Li Sheng immediately and had instead imprisoned him was because he knew that Li Sheng's greatest weakness was that he cherished his life. As long as Li Sheng's life was in his hands, Yun Ruoyan wouldn't be in any danger. If he were to release Li Sheng as he had requested, it would be hard to say what would happen to her. It looks like the far-sighted kings become addicted to staying here. Li Mo turned to Li Sheng. But there's still one more day before the 3-day deadline. If I don't see Yun Ruoyan by tomorrow, don't blame me for being merciless. Su Bei had already spread the news that Li Sheng had been swapped for Yun Ruoyan, but Li Mo was a little surprised that there hadn't been any news in the past 2 days. Li Mo couldn't help but feel a little anxious, and his expression grew colder and colder. Li Sheng leaned against the wall. He hadn't spoken a word since he'd entered the cell. By now he was almost certain that Wei Hai had escaped with Yun Ruoyan. "Wei Hai, if I ever catch you, I won't let you off," Li Sheng thought hatefully. Seeing that Li Sheng still hadn't spoken, Li Mo turned to leave. "Li Mo," Li Sheng called out from behind. "If I'm not mistaken, Wei Hai must have hidden Yun Ruoyan somewhere. Even tomorrow he won't be able to bring Yun Ruoyan back." Li Mo turned around, his eyes cold. "You'd actually use someone who'd betray you to do your bidding?" "I was indeed careless this time," the far-sighted king sighed, a little vexed. "Then you'll be buried with Yen, Li Mo said bluntly. "Wait." Li Sheng finally stood up from where he had been leaning against the wall. He walked over to the cell and hurriedly said, "I know a few places where Wei Hai might be hiding. I can take you there." Inside the cave, Wei Hai took out a dagger and walked toward Yun Ruoyan. "What do you want to do?" Yun Ruoyan stared at Wei Hai vigilantly. Although she had already detoxified the red mist spider's poison, however, when she tried to circulate her spiritual energy, she discovered that she had been poisoned by another poison. It was a kind of poison that was similar to the bone-softening powder, but it was obviously more powerful than the bone-softening powder. After being poisoned by the bone-softening powder, one could still move slowly, but after being poisoned by the bone-softening powder, one could only speak and not move at all. Yun Ruoyan sat by the side of the cage like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. "Don't be afraid." Wei Hai revealed a strange smile and said, "I won't kill you before I figure out your secret. I just want to get a little of your blood." Wei Hai walked to Yun Ruoyan's side, cut her finger with a knife, and extracted some blood from a small white porcelain bottle. Then Wei Hai suddenly sniffed and revealed a greedy look. "Smells so good. I can't smell it from your body, but the smell of your blood is too strong. It's hard not to smell it." Wei Hai raised his head and looked at Yun Ruoyan with a greedy gaze. "What kind of creature are you? A human wouldn't have such a strange smell." "I'm not a creature," Yun Ruoyan replied coolly. "I'm a human, the daughter of the Yun family." In fact, Yun Ruoyan wasn't sure whether she had the blood of a demonic dragon in her veins, but even if she did, she couldn't let Wei Hai know. "It's fine if you don't want to admit it. I'll naturally find out. Something that gives off such a strange smell is definitely something good, comparable to a spiritual pill." Wei Hai placed the porcelain bottle in front of him and sniffed it, as if he had never smelled anything so delicious before. It looked as if it would drink the blood from the porcelain bottle in the next second. Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but feel a wave of disgust wash over her. Based on Wei Hai's description, Yun Ruoyan was certain that, like Li Furong, Wei Hai had also been transformed into a beast. Moreover, from his low cultivation, it was clear that he had also ingested some sort of medicine that could help him transform into a human. He wondered if Wei Hai was a black-armored lizard like Li Furong, or some other species. Yun Ruoyan didn't really care what kind of creature Wei Hai was. What she was worried about was whether he really thought of her as a spiritual pill. "You'd better not have any designs on my blood," Yun Ruoyan warned him. "There's a lethal poison in my body, one that came from my mother's womb, and it's been with me ever since I was born. The birthmark on my face is a result of this poison, and perhaps the strange smell you're smelling is also a result of this poison." Wei Hai paused for a moment, but then he smiled. "You don't have to try to trick me. The far-sighted king's manor has detailed information on you. It's true that you've had the birthmark since you were a child, and that the Yun family despised you for your ugly appearance. But to say that you were poisoned is far too preposterous. I can't help it if you don't believe me. But since you have information on me, you should know that I'm the sole wife-born daughter of the Yun family, Yun Lan's biological daughter. No, 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 no. Wei Hai shook his head. According to the information, you're not Yun Lan's biological daughter. What? What did you say? Say it again. Yun Ruoyan was shocked by Wei Hai's words. Although she had always had some doubts about her parentage, Wei Hai's words didn't surprise her. Although she'd always harbored some suspicions about her birth, this suspicion was completely different from having someone tell her to her face that she wasn't her father's child. According to the information on the far-sighted king's manor, you're not of the Yun family's bloodline. You were born after your mother cheated on you, Wei Hai repeated. Yun Ruoyan suppressed the shock in her heart and suddenly laughed. Are you kidding me? Your joke is too funny. No wonder you don't believe me. It's hard to accept such shocking news, but you don't have to doubt the veracity of it. The far-sighted king spent more than a decade plotting a rebellion. He recorded all the secrets of the large families in the capital, and even the entire Li kingdom, in particular the scandals of adultery and the birth of children out of wedlock. In the future, these will all be used by that old man to blackmail the large families. Perhaps it was because Wei Hai and Yun Ruoyan were alone in the cave, and because Wei Hai was a talkative fellow, Yun Ruoyan tried to get more information out of him. From Wei Hai's mouth, Yun Ruoyan was able to glean some information about herself, and when she compared it with the information she already knew, it was quite believable. According to Wei Hai, 18 years ago, a young Master Long had moved into the Yun household. He was so mysterious that even the far-sighted king's spies were unable to uncover his origins. Young Master Long had stayed with the Yun household for nearly half a year, and during this time he had gotten to know quite a few of the scions of the capital. Among them was Yun Ruoyan's mother Lin Yueme, and her father Yun Lan. According to the far-sighted king's records, young Master Long and Lin Yueme had fallen in love at first sight, and not long after they had pledged to marry each other. However, Lin Yueme's father, Lin Zainan, didn't approve of their relationship, and the two of them could only meet in secret. As for their mutual friend Yun Lan, who was also Yun Ruoyan's father in name, he covered for the two of them. Later, when Lin Zainan was about to betroth Yun Ruoyan to another large family in the capital, the two of them resorted to Yun Lan's method. Yun Lan personally proposed marriage to the Lin family, convincing everyone that he and Lin Yueme were in love. Although the two families had always been at odds with each other, they were still a match of equal status, and both of them had expressed their determination to marry no one else but the other. Left with no choice, the Yun and Lin families could only agree to the marriage. According to the plan, on the night of Yun Lan and Lin Yueme's wedding, young Master Long would elope with Lin Yueme. However, for some reason, young Master Long suddenly disappeared. Lin Yueme thought that young Master Long had chickened out at the last minute, and in a fit of rage she actually married Yun Lan. She settled down as a daughter-in-law and gave birth to Yun Maxiao. The story could have continued this way, but one day a few years later, young Master Long suddenly appeared in front of Lin Yueme and explained to her the reason for his sudden disappearance. Yun Lan had played an important role in this. Yun Lan had always liked Lin Yueme, but Lin Yueme had liked young Master Long instead. As a result, he had plotted to make young Master Long disappear on the night of their wedding. Moreover, while Lin Yueme was broken-hearted, Yun Lan had induced her to hate young Master Long, causing Lin Yueme to feel a desire to take revenge on him, thus achieving his goal of possessing her. When Lin Yueme learned of this, she was filled with regret, and she eloped with young Master Long. The two of them escaped from the Yun family in the capital. At the time, Yun Lan had kept this secret a secret. Because Lin Yueme usually lived in her own garden and rarely interacted with others, even the Yun family didn't know that she had eloped with someone else. As Yun Lan guarded this secret, he frantically searched for the two of them, but it was as if the two of them had vanished from the face of the earth. Just as Yun Lan was in despair, Lin Yueme suddenly returned to the Yun family and became pregnant with a child. According to the records, the child in her womb was Yun Ruoyan. So, you're not the daughter of the Yun family's first wife. You're not even Yun Lan's child. You're just the bastard child of your mother and the young Master Long mentioned in this document. Wei Hai capped the porcelain bottle in his hand and put it away. Nonsense. Yun Ruoyan hugged her legs, curled up in a corner of the cage and sneered. Wei Hai stood up and walked to the entrance of the cage. Now that you've fallen into my hands, you won't be able to live. I'm a talkative person, but I don't like to lie. I wouldn't be so bored as to lie to someone who's about to die. However, what I've said is only what's recorded in the records. Even if there's a mistake, I'm not lying to you. Wei Hai paused for a moment before continuing. One more thing. The information on young Master Long has been encrypted, and I don't have the right to read it. All encrypted documents in the far-sighted king's manor are considered secrets, and your biological father is truly a mysterious figure. Chapter 243. As soon as he finished speaking, Wei Hai turned to leave. "Where are you going?" Xuanhuan asked. "I'm going to take your blood and find an old man to see what kind of beast you are." Wei Hai turned back. "This cave is halfway up the mountain. You've been poisoned by my powder, so don't try to escape or you'll fall to your death." As soon as Wei Hai finished speaking, he opened his arms wide and jumped down from the cave. As he jumped, his body suddenly changed. Because he disappeared so quickly, Xuanhuan didn't see exactly how he had changed. All she saw was a feather growing out of his open arms, indicating that he was a bird. "Xiao, am I really not human? Is my surname really not Yun?" The questions that had been buried deep in her heart had finally been answered, but Xuanhuan didn't feel the slightest bit relieved. Instead, her heart felt even heavier. "Mistress, if you really want to know whether or not this fellow's words are trustworthy, you'll have to personally go to the far-sighted king's secret archives." "Right." Xuanhuan forced herself to sit up straight. "I'll have to see for myself." Actually, Xuanhuan still had some doubts about whether she was Yun Lan's biological daughter or not. In Xuanhuan's mind, before her cultivation had deteriorated and the birthmark on her face hadn't worsened, Yun Lan had still doted on her. In the Yun family, she had always been the sole wife-born daughter. But as her cultivation deteriorated and the birthmark on her face worsened, Yun Lan's attitude toward Xuanhuan grew colder and colder, and her status in the Yun family plummeted. If she hadn't been Yun Lan's biological father, would he have doted on her for so many years? This was one of Xuanhuan's doubts. But if it was only because Xuanhuan's cultivation had regressed and her appearance had turned ugly, then why was she still so unwelcome after Xuanhuan's cultivation had recovered and she had become beautiful? And who was that young Master Long? Why had he taken her mother away and then allowed her to return to the Yun manor alone? What had happened? Xuanhuan felt as if she had sunk into a fog once more. Xiao could sense Xuanhuan's confusion and distress. Some things can't be answered. Perhaps the truth will surface on its own when the time comes. Master, before that, we should think about how to live well. Xiao's words jolted Xuanhuan out of her troubled thoughts. "Xiao, is there any antidote for this poison?" Xuanhuan asked. "Yes." Xiao said, "The bracelet's spatial pocket just so happens to have the ingredients needed to concoct the antidote for this poison. Master, do you still remember the medicine rabbit's inner core? It just so happens to be an important ingredient for concocting the bone-softening powder. But I can't use my spiritual power right now. If I can't use my spiritual power, I can't concoct medicine," Xuanhuan said helplessly. To use spiritual energy, one had to guide spiritual energy from the spiritual vortex to the hands through the meridians. The meridian softening powder caused the meridians to be blocked, making it impossible to draw upon the spiritual energy in the spiritual sea. "Master can't, but Xiao can." Xiao's tone suddenly became cheerful. "You can use spiritual energy to refine the antidote?" Xuanhuan looked at Xiao incredulously. Ever since Xiao had become Xuanhuan's contracted beast, it hadn't had much spiritual energy left. It was only later that Xuanhuan found out that Xiao had been severely injured while fighting alongside the Beast King, causing its spiritual energy to be almost depleted. Now that Xiao was suddenly saying that it could use spiritual energy, Xuanhuan was naturally quite surprised. "Yes, Master," Xiao replied. "During this period of time, Xiao has been cultivating in the pocket dimension, and I've recovered quite a bit of spiritual energy. I should be able to refine an antidote. However, there's something I haven't told you yet." "Gem? What is it?" Xuanhuan asked. "That stalk of amaranthine sun contains fire-attuned spiritual energy that'll be of great help to Xiao's cultivation. Without your permission, Master, Xiao used it to cultivate." Xiao was a fire-attuned Qilin beast, and the amaranthine sun was also a fire-attuned spiritual herb. In fact, Xiao had unintentionally discovered that the spiritual energy within the amaranthine sun would flow into its spiritual vortex along with the spiritual energy in the bracelet's pocket dimension, greatly increasing its spiritual energy. However, Xiao knew that the amaranthine sun was also very important to Xuanhuan, who also cultivated a fire-attuned spiritual technique. "That's great," Xuanhuan exclaimed. She naturally didn't mind Xiao using the amaranthine sun, and was very happy that it could help Xiao recover its spiritual energy. "Now that Xiao's spiritual energy has recovered, it can be my assistant. Yes, once I've recovered 80% of my spiritual energy, I can try to break the bracelet seal and regain my freedom." Xiao's tone was excited. Because Xuanhuan couldn't use spiritual energy, She couldn't use her spiritual sense to enter the bracelet's pocket dimension. She could only quietly wait for Xiao to refine the antidote. She sat there quietly for a while. With nothing else to do, she couldn't help but think about her own birth. Whenever she thought about it, she felt as if she were shrouded in a fog. In order to divert her attention and kill some time, Xuanhuan took out a dagger from her trousers and began to cut the iron bars of the cage. The dagger in Xuanhuan's hand was made of dark steel. Although it wasn't a spiritual weapon, it was still able to cut through metal as if it were mud. However, the cage seemed to be made of a special kind of metal. After a long time, the dark steel dagger only left a faint white mark on the cage. It was almost impossible to destroy the cage with a dagger. However, if she had spiritual energy, it would be a different story. If she were to infuse her 7th rank cultivation into the dagger, she would be able to unleash the dagger's full potential, and there was a chance that she would be able to break through the cage. "Mistress, the antidote is ready." After about 15 minutes, Xiao's voice rang out in Xuanhuan's mind once more. "Mistress, open your hand and I'll give you the antidote." Unable to use spiritual energy, Xuanhuan couldn't even grab items from her pocket dimension. So far, she only had the ability to communicate with Xiao telepathically. Xuanhuan opened her hand and before long, a light-colored pill appeared in her palm. She swallowed the pill, then sat cross-legged and began to meditate, waiting for the pill to take effect. After another 15 minutes, Xuanhuan slowly raised her hand, and a flickering flame appeared in her palm. The antidote had taken effect, and her meridians had finally been cleared. Xuanhuan stood up from the ground, gripping the dark steel dagger in her hand. She slowly drew out spiritual energy from her spiritual vortex and infused it into the dagger, causing it to glow with a white spiritual light, and its power instantly increased several-fold. Xuanhuan raised her hand, about to chop at the bars of the cage. Just then Xiao's voice rang out in Xuanhuan's mind. "That brat's back, mistress. Now that you're out, you can teach him a lesson." Xuanhuan stopped chopping at the bars. After a moment's thought, she put away her dagger and sat back down in the corner of the cage. "Didn't he say that he would use my blood to show others what kind of beast I am?" Xuanhuan asked Xiao. "I'd like to see what kind of beast I am." As soon as Xuanhuan finished speaking, a black shadow flew over from afar and landed at the entrance of the cave. This time, Xuanhuan could clearly see that it was a strange, gray-feathered bird that she didn't know the name of. The gray-feathered bird stopped at the entrance of the cave, and with a shake of its body, all its black feathers fell off, revealing Wei Hai's human form. "Not bad, you're quite obedient." Wei Hai smiled when he saw that Xuanhuan was still sitting there as quietly as when he had left. "You seem to be in a good mood." Xuanhuan opened her half-closed eyes and looked at Wei Hai. "I'm probably a pretty good beast, aren't I?" Wei Hai chuckled but didn't answer Xuanhuan's question. Instead, he sat down by Xuanhuan's side and looked her up and down. Wei Hai's gaze was very subtle, and Xuanhuan found it repulsive. "What are you looking at?" Xuanhuan frowned, slightly angry. Wei Hai chuckled again, his gaze becoming even more ambiguous. "I didn't think I'd actually picked up a treasure this time." "What do you mean?" Xuanhuan glanced at him. "What I mean is that you're a treasure," Wei Hai emphasized. "I was going to kill you, but now I'm going to raise you." Xuanhuan finally looked at Wei Hai seriously. "Since I'm already in your hands, there's no need for you to hide anything from me, is there? Tell me, what did you find out about my blood?" Ever since Xuanhuan had discovered that she possessed a demonic dragon's bloodline in the demonic dragon grotto, she had kept this matter to herself, not even telling Liu Mo about it. She had always wanted to prove the truth of this matter, and it was clear that Wei Hai knew something about it. In response to Xuanhuan's question, Wei Hai continued to smile ambiguously. "No wonder the Slaughtering King, despite his reputation for staying away from women, is so close and protective of you, even raising you as his disciple. He must have known about your precious constitution, which is why he's willing to pay so much for you." What did this have to do with Liu Mo? What precious constitution? Xuanhuan's frown deepened as she patiently listened to Wei Hai's explanation. "From your expression, you don't seem to know about your precious constitution, do you?" Wei Hai looked at Xuanhuan with pity. "Tiske, how pitiful. What do you mean? If you have something to say, just say it. There's no need to beat around the bush." Xuanhuan's patience was about to run out. "I'm far more honest than the Slaughtering King. On one hand, I'm raising and using you, and on the other, I'm lying to you." Wei Hai finally cut to the chase. "I'll tell you the truth, I brought your blood to the old tortoise, hoping that he'd be able to determine why your blood had such a strange fragrance. In the end he couldn't tell what you were, but he discovered that you possessed a precious constitution. What constitution? Xuanhuan asked. Chapter 244. Xuanhuan stared at Wei Hai, waiting for his reply. Wei Hai smiled. Your constitution is that of a human furnace. Just as Wei Hai was about to reveal the secret that Liu Mo had kept from Xuanhuan all this time, he suddenly sensed several powerful auras approaching. Wei Hai immediately shut up. Xuanhuan had also sensed those auras, and one of them was Liu Mo's familiar aura. Speak. Xuanhuan couldn't care less about anything else as she pressed Wei Hai. But Wei Hai's expression changed greatly. He could not be bothered to continue his words just now and stood up all at once. You're here so quickly? He looked at Xuanhuan. The slaughtering king really does treasure you. He then opened the cage and dragged Xuanhuan to the entrance of the cave. Finish what you're saying. Xuanhuan asked urgently as she was dragged to the entrance of the cave. Beneath her feet was a bottomless abyss. I don't have time to waste on you. Let's escape first. Wei Hai pulled Xuanhuan down the abyss. Hey! Xuanhuan yelped in surprise. Wei Hai's body had begun to transform. Black feathers sprouted from his arms, neck, head and face. In a few breaths, Wei Hai had transformed from a human into a strange bird. Xuanhuan was currently lying on top of the bird's body. Just then Xuanhuan saw two sword auras appear in front of her, one of which was a black-robed Liu Mo. The other was also a black-robed man. Xuanhuan recognized him as Su Bei, and he was accompanied by a middle-aged man dressed in official robes, the far-sighted king Li Sheng. Yener. Li Mo's voice drifted over from afar, a barely detectable tremor in his voice. In the past 2 days and 1 night, Liu Mo had felt an unprecedented sense of worry and anxiety. Li Sheng led them through a series of twists and turns before finally finding Xuanhuan. His heart couldn't relax. When Wei Hai saw the people in front of him, he immediately turned around and fled. Wei Hai, put Yener down and I'll let you die a quick death. Li Mo's voice rang out from behind Wei Hai. Wei Hai, you traitor. Stop right there. Li Sheng also yelled. Wei Hai sensed the danger of the situation, but he ignored the two of them and used all his strength to escape. Wei Hai, you won't be able to escape. If we can't escape, we'll just die together. Wei Hai said coldly. You don't look like someone who would risk his life. As Xuanhuan spoke, she gripped the feathers on Wei Hai's back tightly. Because Wei Hai was too fast, the wind was so strong that Xuanhuan felt as if she could be blown off the ground at any moment. She could only hold onto Wei Hai's feathers tightly and press her body against his to barely stabilize herself. Miss Yun, you seem to value your life more than I do, Wei Hai said. If you don't want to die, you have to hurry up. As Wei Hai spoke, his already fast speed increased once more. You beast. The far-sighted king's voice rang out by her ear. Hurry up and let Miss Yun go. How dare you betray me like this? Your master is a loyal man. Aren't you afraid that he'll be disappointed in the afterlife? Li Sheng's tone was full of sorrow. Your master and senior sister are gone. Now you're the only one left. How can this king watch you seek your own death? Quickly let go of Miss Yun and this king can spare your life. It can also be considered as comforting the souls of your master and senior sister in heaven. Wei Hai sneered. You're really good at brainwashing people. My master and senior sister were brainwashed by you, and that's why they lost their lives. I'm not as stupid as they are. As soon as Wei Hai finished speaking, a green streak of light flashed past him. Li Mo's figure was blocking his path. At first, Liu Mo didn't dare to chase too closely, afraid that Wei Hai would do something to harm Xuanhuan. From Li Sheng, Liu Mo had learned that Wei Hai was known as the Poison Prince, and that his entire body was filled with poisonous bugs, some of which could instantly poison a person to death. Even though Liu Mo had already caught up to Wei Hai, he didn't dare to chase too closely. Instead, he maintained a distance of about 15 feet. Damn it, what a fast speed. Wei Hai growled and changed the direction of his escape again. A green light flashed in front of Wei Hai's eyes again. Liu Mo had once again appeared in front of him, and this time Su Bei had also rushed over. The two of them formed a pincer attack on Wei Hai. Wei Hai, how about I make a deal with you? Seeing that Wei Hai had nowhere to run, Xuanhuan spoke up. What deal? Wei Hai asked. Agree to 2 of my requests and I'll beg Liu Mo to spare your life. 2 requests. Wei Hai said, tell me about them. First, tell me who the traitor to Kongming Academy is. Second, finish what you wanted to say. Wei Hai thought for a moment. I can't fulfill the first request because I don't know either. All I know is from the far-sighted king himself. As for the second request, if I were to tell you, I'm afraid you wouldn't even be able to die. Wei Hai couldn't help but think of the slaughtering king's infuriating corpses. He had already touched Li Mo's sore spot once, so he decided to leave a way out for himself. Wei Hai, hurry up and release Miss Yun. Do you really not want to live anymore? Li Sheng said with a pained expression. Old geezer, don't put on an act with me, Wei Hai sneered. I didn't expect you to find me even after I hid here. I'm curious though, how did you find this place? Black Robe had once taught Wei Hai that a cunning rabbit has 3 burrows. He had also prepared 3 extremely secretive locations within 500 miles of where they lived, which was the far-sighted king's residence, as hiding places when they escaped. Wei Hai was extremely confident in these locations, and they were one of the reasons why he had dared to kidnap Yun Ruoyan. What he hadn't expected was that Li Mo and the others would find him in just 2 short days. I, the far-sighted king, am naturally confident in my abilities. You crafty rabbits have 3 burrows, and even if I'm not sure of the exact location, I have a pretty good idea. However, you actually dared to betray this king, which is beyond my expectations. The far-sighted king sighed. Since you're courting death, don't blame me for not protecting you. Then cut the crap and come at me. Wei Hai shouted as he charged toward the far-sighted king. Li Sheng immediately hid behind Su Bei, but Wei Hai turned around and released a red mist spider at Li Mo, a diversion. Li Mo, be careful of the spider. Yun Ruoyan tried to stop the spider, but she was 1 step too late, and it reached Li Mo in an instant. As if he hadn't heard her, Li Mo continued to stand on his sword, his hands behind his back. For a moment, Wei Hai thought that he had succeeded, but he quickly realized that he had been too naive. When the red mist spider arrived in front of Li Mo, it was blocked by a layer of spiritual energy around Li Mo's body, unable to advance an inch. Li Mo looked at the tiny red mist spider trapped in the spiritual energy membrane, and a blue light flashed in his eyes. With a poof, the red mist spider turned into a ball of red mist and disappeared. Wei Hai's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately sent out a series of venomous bugs at Li Mo. Every single one of them was blocked by Li Mo's spiritual barrier, and they exploded into mist at the same time. The sound of the poisonous insects exploding filled the air for a while. Your Highness, I'd like to make a deal with you. Seeing that he really couldn't break through Li Mo's defenses, Wei Hai suddenly had an idea. I don't make deals with others, Li Mo replied. This is a secret that only you and I know about, Miss Yun, Wei Hai said hurriedly. Slaughtering King, you'll regret it if you don't make this deal. Li Mo frowned but didn't speak. Wei Hai continued, if you spare my life, I'll keep this secret forever. Otherwise, I'll tell Miss Yun right now. Given her personality, if she learns of this secret, she won't let you have your way. Wei Hai's words made Li Mo's expression even darker. Yun Ruoyan was even more curious and confused. Wei Hai, what secret does it have to do with me? Yun Ruoyan knew that Wei Hai wouldn't tell her, but she couldn't help asking. As expected, Wei Hai ignored her question and continued to stare at Li Mo, waiting for his answer. Alright, I promise not to kill you. Return Yin to me right now, Li Mo replied after a moment's thought. Slaughtering King, you're a man of your word. Wei Hai didn't seem to believe Li Mo's words. If I go back on my word, I'll be struck by lightning. Li Mo repeated Wei Hai's words. Now, can you return Yin to me? Since you've already made your vow, I'm relieved. Wei Hai flew downward. Li Mo and Su Bei followed suit. When they reached the ground, they retracted their swords, and Wei Hai reverted to his human form. Here's the antidote. Wei Hai took out an antidote and handed it to Yun Ruoyan. Eat this antidote and the poison in your body will be completely cured. Yun Ruoyan had already recovered from the effects of Qiuqiu's antidote, but she still took the antidote from Wei Hai. Yun Ruoyan could tell that although Wei Hai's cultivation wasn't very high, he was definitely a very skilled poisoner. Sometimes he could even put his own poisons into the bodies of venomous insects, making them even more venomous. It wouldn't be a bad idea to keep one of such a genius poisoner's pills for future research. Yun Ruoyan took the antidote, put it away, and walked briskly toward Li Mo. How did you? You didn't eat my antidote? That's impossible. Wei Hai exclaimed in disbelief. Given Yun Ruoyan's cultivation, she would be able to beat Wei Hai to a pulp once she recovered her cultivation, but she had pretended that she hadn't. It seemed that Yun Ruoyan had been putting on an act all this time, all so that she could pry out his secrets. Just as Yun Ruoyan was about to speak, she saw Su Bei appear behind Wei Hai. In his hand was Wei Hai's unique flexible sword, which he thrust into Wei Hai's chest from behind. Chapter 245. Wei Hai's eyes widened as he looked down at the sword in his chest. He hadn't expected Li Mo to break his oath. The people of the Xuanhuan continent believed in the supernatural, and oaths were the most important thing to them. How could Li Mo break his oath? Break your oath. Aren't you afraid of being struck by lightning? Wei Hai looked at Li Mo. What Wei Hai didn't know was that being struck by lightning wasn't a big deal to Li Mo. Li Mo didn't even look at Wei Hai. His gaze was fixed on Xuanhuan. Xuanhuan, on the other hand, was looking at Wei Hai. Before he could tell her what she wanted to know, he had died just like that. Su Bei pulled out his sword, and fresh blood spurted out from the wound on Wei Hai's chest. Suddenly, Xuanhuan felt a warm sensation on her body. Li Mo had walked to her side and draped his robe over her shoulders. Wei Hai coughed up a mouthful of blood, and his body slumped to the ground. As he took his last breath, he used the last of his strength to look at Xuanhuan. If you want to know, ask the old turtle. Who's the old tortoise? Where can I find him? Xuanhuan asked hurriedly, but Wei Hai had already breathed his last. Li Mo glanced at Su Bei, who nodded almost imperceptibly. That feathered beast really deserves to die. The far-sighted king Li Sheng walked over and looked disdainfully at Wei Hai's lifeless body. Xuanhuan turned to look at Li Sheng, her tone mocking. This feathered brute seemed to have been ordered by you to kidnap me, didn't he? His death isn't to be regretted, but neither are you. Although Wei Hai didn't strike Xuanhuan as a good person, he was at least an upright one. Li Sheng, on the other hand, left an extremely poor impression on Xuanhuan. Xuanhuan's previous impression of the far-sighted king had all come from the mouths of others. Xuanhuan felt that a man who could lie low for more than a decade in order to obtain the power he desired had to be a remarkable character, even if he wasn't a hero. However, after seeing Li Sheng's despicable behavior, Xuanhuan felt that he really didn't live up to his reputation. In front of the emperor of the Li Kingdom, Li Xiu, he was a far cry. Although Li Xiu was all smiles, he was actually quite astute, as evidenced by his attitude toward Li Mo. Li Sheng, on the other hand, had offended Li Mo as soon as he arrived. Apart from the Beastmen War many years ago, Li Mo had never participated in the politics of the Li Kingdom. Apart from the Beastkin War many years ago, Li Sheng had never participated in the affairs of the kingdom again. Xuanhuan felt that with Li Sheng's inability to grasp the situation, even if he were to rebel, it would be difficult for him to accomplish anything significant. Miss Yun, this prince was only joking with you. I didn't really want to do anything to you. Yun, Li Yun replied. Li Sheng straightened his back and assumed the posture of a prince. If it weren't for this prince, Miss Yun wouldn't have been able to be saved. Sheng Yun imomo, Li Yun said. Xuanhuan didn't think that Li Mo would let Li Sheng off so easily, but to her surprise, Li Mo simply waved at Su Bei. King Li Su Li. Immediately, Sheng to King, Mo, Yun Li, Yun Sheng Mo. Sheng had to say. You're letting him off just like that? Xuanhuan turned to Li Mo. After all, Li Sheng was the main culprit, and she wasn't willing to let him off so easily. Furthermore, she had a request for Li Sheng. She wanted to go to the far-sighted king's manor and look through her own records. There'll be plenty of opportunities to vent your anger in the future. Right now we have to hurry back to Kongming Mountain, Li Mo said. Did something happen at the academy? Xuanhuan asked when she saw Li Mo's serious expression. Nothing's happened at the academy, Li Mo replied. But the first elder sent me a message that the portal to the alternate dimension will open a year in advance. We'll need to select a new batch of students to enter the alternate dimension and train them. The portal would only open once every 3 years, but this time, it would open a year in advance. This meant that the students would only have a year to train. Compared to the past, time was of the essence. In that case, let's hurry back. Xuanhuan had heard from Li Mo that the first requirement to enter the alternate dimension was to become an 8th rank blade master. Only after reaching 8th rank could a blade master begin to cultivate their own flying swords and become a true blade master. Only by becoming a true blade master would one be able to enter the alternate dimension and fight for treasures. Otherwise, they'd be nothing more than cannon fodder. Even someone like Li Mo, who was a 9th rank blade master and infinitely close to becoming a sword saint, would be nothing more than an ordinary cultivator in the alternate dimension. As a result, this year's training would be extremely important to both Li Mo and Xuanhuan. How are you feeling after being poisoned? Li Mo asked when he saw Xuanhuan's pale complexion. I'm fine. The poison's been cured. Let's head out now. A few hours later, just as the sky was turning dark, Xuanhuan and Li Mo returned to Kongming Academy. Liemo first sent Yunruoyan back to her cottage by the cliff before heading to the southern tower. The first elder was waiting for him there. "Master, why did the portal suddenly open so early?" Liemo asked the first elder. The great elder's expression was also rather solemn. "I don't have the authority to ask too much about the matters of the other world. It's just that I suddenly received a message from the heaven's eye mirror, and the number of people entering the other world this time has increased by 10. You're saying that Kongming Academy will be sending 30 students into the alternate dimension?" Liemo's tone was slightly shocked. In the past, 20 students had entered the alternate dimension, but 30 this time. 30 students wasn't a large number for Kongming Academy's 3,000 students, but it wasn't easy for them to recruit 8th-rank blade masters. The new batch of students was, on average, a 5th-rank blade master. Even among the older students, there weren't many 8th-rank blade masters. 30 8th-rank and above blade masters were almost all of Kongming Academy's elite students. Although Liemo had never entered the alternate dimension before, having grown up in Kongming Academy, he was very familiar with the alternate dimension that only happened once every 3 years. Coupled with the first elder's tutelage, Liemo was the only person in the entire Kongming Academy who understood the alternate dimension better than anyone else. Those who hadn't entered the alternate dimension believed that it was filled with treasures, spiritual herbs, and that it must be a land of immortals. As a result, they all desperately wanted to explore it. Liemo had been no exception. It was only after the first elder explained the situation in detail to Liemo that he gained a clearer understanding of the alternate dimension. While it was true that the alternate dimension was filled with treasures, it was also a land of tigers and wolves. There were many existences in the alternate dimension that the people of the Xuanhuan continent couldn't even begin to imagine, and all of them possessed monstrous cultivation. 8th-rank blade masters were like ants in front of them. If they moved even the slightest bit, they'd be dead without even a trace of their bodies left to rot. As a result, very few of the students who entered the alternate dimension ever returned. But when they did, without exception, become one of the most powerful individuals on the Xuanhuan continent, and without exception, they all refused to allow their most valued children to enter Kongming Academy. Yun Maxiao, Wang Meng, and a number of other talented students had all been rejected by their parents. Wang Meng had only managed to enter the academy because of a special reason, and that had been without his father's knowledge. Tomorrow there will be a meeting of the elders to draw up a list of students to enter the alternate dimension, the first elder began. The first elder turned to Liemo. "Anyone who's a 6th-rank blade master or higher has a chance of being chosen. That last Yunruoyan is already a 6th-rank blade master. What are your plans?" "She'll only be of age next year, and I naturally don't want her to enter such a cruel place as soon as she's of age." Liemo sighed almost imperceptibly. "I originally wanted to wait until she was a little older before going with her to the alternate dimension. But she's looking forward to this trip, and I have to participate as well. I'll analyze the pros and cons with her, and if she's willing, I'll bring her along. If not, I won't force her." The next morning, after a night's rest, Yunruoyan's energy had mostly recovered. Early in the morning, Yunruoyan made some preparations before heading to the bamboo garden to ask Lin Qingqian to accompany her to the Southern College for lessons. She wondered if missing 2 days of classes would affect her progress, and if she could get Liemo to write her a leave of absence. At that moment, Liemo suddenly floated in through the window. Yunruoyan was already used to Liemo's habit. After a moment's hesitation, Yunruoyan asked, "Has there been a new development in the alternate dimension?" Liemo walked over, somewhat speechless, and hugged Yunruoyan's petite body. "I've spent a lot of effort to get Yen to get close to me. Why do I feel like you've returned to your previous coldness toward me?" "Have I?" Yunruoyan murmured in Liemo's embrace. Even Yunruoyan herself didn't realize that she had subconsciously distanced herself from Liemo. Liemo guessed that Wei Hai must have said something to Yunruoyan, but judging from Yunruoyan's attitude, it seemed that she didn't know much about it, so she only seemed to dislike him a little. Liemo thought that he should find an opportunity to tell Yunruoyan about the human furnace, but the most important matter at the moment was the alternate dimension. If he were to tell Yunruoyan about this matter now, Liemo couldn't predict how she would react, so he decided to put the matter aside for now. "Yen, no matter what happens, you have to remember that you're the woman I care about very much," Liemo said slowly as he hugged Yunruoyan. Although Liemo had always enjoyed being close to Yunruoyan, this was the first time he'd said something so straightforward and mushy. Yunruoyan's face reddened and she burst out laughing. She buried her face in Liemo's chest, her hands slowly tightening around Liemo's waist. Are you afraid that I'll forget that you're the slaughtering king that everyone fears? Xuanhuan laughed. Ha, Liemo chuckled. Others might be afraid of me but not my xianxia. Chapter 246. Your Highness Slaughtering King. Xuanhuan lifted her head from Liemo's chest. You didn't come all the way here just to say these few words, did you? Liemo couldn't help but tap her on the forehead when he saw Xuanhuan's innocent expression. Ouch, why did you hit me? It hurts. Xuanhuan clutched her forehead and glared at Liemo. If you have something to say, hurry up and say it. I still have to go to class. You don't have to go to class. Liemo let go of Xuanhuan and pulled her over to a small table. He began to explain the situation in the alternate dimension to Xuanhuan. Before me, the Great Elder had actually accepted 2 disciples, one male and one female. However, they both died in the otherworld trials. Although I've never been to the alternate dimension, I'm well aware of its dangers. Each time, less than 1/10 of my fellow disciples make it out alive, and sometimes not even a single one. This time, for some reason, the alternate dimension opened earlier than expected, and the number of people entering has increased by 1/3. I'm afraid that it's even more dangerous than before. Liemo looked at Xuanhuan. Tomorrow the elders will decide on the list of students participating in the alternate dimension. If you don't want to go, will you? Xuanhuan interrupted Liemo, her bright eyes looking at him. I wanted to go 3 years ago but the first elder stopped me. This time I have to go but you dash. I'm going too. Xuanhuan interrupted Liemo once more, her tone firm. I'm going with you. That night, at the top of the Southern College's tower, Liemo, the 6 elders and the first elder's disciple, were in the midst of a meeting. You all know that our central college has always been known as the useless college, so we can't produce any students. The 6th elder was the one speaking, his face smiling as if he didn't care about his reputation at all. 6th elder, you're far too unkind. The 3rd elder used his fat finger to point at the 6th elder and continued, if we were to rank them according to their ranks, none of the students from the other 4 academies could compare to the students from your academy. It was common knowledge that the students of the Central College, which the 6th elder represented, were the weakest in all of Kongming Academy. However, in order to ensure that the students of the Central College wouldn't be so weak when they graduated, the 6th elder had resorted to cheating to help them advance in rank. Who's the unkind one? The 6th elder wasn't willing. Who here doesn't know about our academy's situation? Isn't letting them go to the other world the same as sending them to their deaths? Our academy's cultivation is also low, so even if they go, they'll still be sending themselves to their deaths. The Western Academy's elder echoed. None of you are willing to send anyone. Could it be that we, the 3 courtyards, have to send all 30 people? The 2nd elder, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke up. As soon as the 2nd elder spoke, everyone shut their mouths. It could be seen that everyone was somewhat afraid of him. As the saying goes, the capable do more work. After a long while, the 6th elder said in a low voice, Old 6, what are you whispering about? If you have something to say, say it out loud. Let's all hear it, the 2nd elder said coldly. That's right, 6th elder. Everyone should be sharing the spots equally, but you're refusing to do so. Based on the percentage of students who survive each expedition, those who are 1 or 2 ranks higher than the others are practically negligible. In any case, they'll all be sending themselves to their deaths. That's right. In my opinion, it's better to send those with lower cultivation than those with higher cultivation, the 5th elder said. 5th elder, what do you mean by that? The 6th elder's eyes widened in shock. Are you trying to cheat? The minimum requirement for entering the other world was for 8th rank blade masters. Before that, any 5th rank blade master could be included in the list, and once it was made, it wouldn't be changed. After the training, the chosen students' cultivation would increase. If they still couldn't become 8th rank blade masters after the training, they would be given a spiritual pill that would forcibly increase their cultivation. This spiritual pill was only suitable for 4th rank blade masters and above. As long as one satisfied this condition, they would be able to reach 8th rank in a short period of time. However, this pill had certain side effects. If one only used it to increase 1 or 2 ranks, the side effects wouldn't be obvious, but if one used it to increase one's cultivation by more than 2 ranks, it would be like spoiling a seedling to help it grow. Once consumed, there would be no obvious increase in cultivation. In addition, his ability to draw spiritual energy into his body and use it to fight was much weaker than others. He was basically a fake 8th rank blade master, just there to make up the numbers. Haha. The 5th elder chuckled. 6th elder, why are you so surprised? Isn't cheating your forte? Fifth elder, don't get it wrong. My cheating isn't a big deal, but it's a big deal. Cheating is a very important matter. Why not? I think fifth elder's suggestion is very good. What's good about it? If we are discovered by the guards of the otherworld gate, the consequences will be unthinkable. The elders began to argue with each other again. Liemo sat by the first elder's side, not saying a word. He was already used to such a scene. In the past, every time the gate between worlds opened, the elders would argue for a long time in order to decide on the list of students to go to the otherworld. The students who didn't know what was going on the other hand, were all looking forward to the treasure hunt. Every time, the students from the Central College would be dissatisfied with the small number of names they received, feeling that the other 5 colleges were bullying them. All right, the first elder finally said. Everyone, including the second elder, quietened down at this moment. Everyone's gazes were fixed on the great elder. Cheating isn't an option. The first elder immediately rejected the fifth elder's suggestion. If they sent someone with some cultivation, there would still be a chance of survival. But if they cheated, the person sent out would undoubtedly die. As the first elder of Kongming Academy, he couldn't bear to see so many innocent students go to their deaths. The first elder would rather send out a few students who had a chance of survival. If they managed to escape, they would surely become the strongest cultivators on the Xuanhuan continent. To them, this was an opportunity. We'll need a total of 30 students this time. The Southern College will send 10, the first elder continued. The Northern College will send 8, and the Western and Eastern colleges will send 5 each. The first elder turned to the sixth elder. The Central College will send 2. What do you think? The sixth elder seemed to have something else to say, but after a moment's thought, he decided against it. Then it's settled. The first elder stood up from his seat. I'll give you 1 day to come up with a name list and submit it to me as soon as possible. We only have a year's time for the training. Liemo will be in charge of the training in the alternate dimension, and he's also on the list to enter the alternate dimension. In the Central District, the sixth elder found Zhuo Yifeng and told him about the training in the alternate dimension. Yifeng, although you're a new student, your cultivation is one of the best in the entire Central College. As such, I'm prepared to give you one of the 2 slots to enter the alternate dimension. Hearing this news, Zhuo Yifeng's bright eyes became even brighter because of excitement. Thank you, sixth elder, for giving me this opportunity. I won't let you down. Most of the new students had heard about the alternate dimension from the older students. Naturally, Zhuo Yifeng had heard of it as well. Those who had been chosen to enter the alternate dimension were all experts of the academy. The alternate dimension was filled with treasures, and it was a place that everyone yearned for. Anyone who managed to walk out of the alternate dimension would become an influential figure on the Xuanhuan continent. It was said that the heads of the 4 empires' chambers of commerce, the Yuelu villa's master, Dong Tieha, and the commander of the northern barracks of the Li Kingdom, General Huang, were all experts who had come from the alternate dimension. The students of Kongming Academy were always excited when they heard this. Being able to enter the alternate dimension had become one of their dreams. Seeing Zhuo Yifeng's excited expression, the sixth elder couldn't help but say a few more words. Although there are many treasures in the alternate dimension, it's also extremely dangerous. You mustn't let your guard down. You must prioritize your life above all treasures. Yifeng understands. Thank you for your guidance, sixth elder, Zhuo Yifeng said gratefully. Alright, you may go. The sixth elder waved his hand at Zhuo Yifeng, who bowed and retreated. The sixth elder looked at Zhuo Yifeng's retreating figure and couldn't help but sigh. It hadn't been easy for him to recruit a talented student who suited his tastes, and now he was about to send him off to a dangerous place. The sixth elder couldn't bear to see him go. After Zhuo Yifeng left the sixth elder's residence, he didn't return to the male dormitory. Instead, he took a detour to the cliff at the back of the mountain. Zhuo Yifeng arrived at the edge of the cliff. Seeing that it was still early, he pulled out a pheasant that he had hunted that morning from a nearby bush. Because of the cold weather, the pheasant had already been frozen stiff. Zhuo Yifeng used his right hand to pat the pheasant in his left hand, causing the stiff pheasant to soften. Afterwards, Zhuo Yifeng took the pheasant to a nearby spring and began to tidy it up. After tidying up the pheasant, he spread the seasoning he'd prepared and started to roast it. Not long after, the smell of burnt meat filled the air. At this time, a black figure silently appeared in front of Zhuo Yifeng. Zhuo Yifeng was so focused on roasting the pheasant that he didn't notice the person's arrival. Until the black figure walked over and sat down in front of him. Only then did Zhuo Yifeng raise his head in alarm. Senior, you've come. Zhuo Yifeng had a joyful smile on his face. His beastman eyes flickered with two flickering flames. The black figure only glanced at Zhuo Yifeng before quickly lowering his head. He casually picked up a wooden stick from the ground and threw it into the fire. He casually said, "Your reaction to danger is so low. Your punishment is to practice the wooden vine technique 100 times. Chapter 247. Yes, Senior. Zhuo Yifeng said with a smile, not the slightest bit dissatisfied with the punishment. Senior, it'll be ready soon. Zhuo Yifeng flipped the meat over the fire, then took out some spices and sprinkled them on top of the meat. In an instant, a strange aroma filled the air. The black-clothed man couldn't help but swallow and say, "Your barbecue skills are quite good. It's a skill passed down in my family." Zhuo Yifeng replied with a smile, "I still remember when my father taught me how to barbecue when I was a child. That was what I called delicious." About half a month ago, Zhuo Yifeng caught some game and barbecued it by himself. The black-clothed man suddenly appeared and asked Zhuo Yifeng for it, so Zhuo Yifeng gave it to him. Unexpectedly, the black-clothed man became addicted to it. He made a request to Zhuo Yifeng, asking him to come here every 3 days to prepare game for him. As a reward, the black-clothed man taught him an external technique to cultivate spirit force. Under the black-clothed man's guidance, Zhuo Yifeng began to cultivate a wood attribute technique. The wooden vine technique was the first external technique the black-clothed man taught Zhuo Yifeng. "Master here?" Zhuo Yifeng handed the roasted game to the black-clothed man. "Master, last time you said you were going to teach me a second wood attribute technique. Is it starting today?" "Don't call me master." The black-clothed man took the barbecued meat from Zhuo Yifeng and said in a cold voice, "You and I are just acquaintances. I taught you my cultivation technique in exchange for your delicious food. There is no master-disciple relationship between us." "Senior, I understand," Zhuo Yifeng said in a somewhat discouraged manner. In the past half a month, Zhuo Yifeng had tried many times to get closer to the black-clothed man, but the black-clothed man always tried his best to keep his distance. For some reason, the first time Zhuo Yifeng saw this person, he felt an indescribable sense of familiarity. This person always wore a mask, and Zhuo Yifeng clearly hadn't seen his face before. This sense of familiarity was strange, but it was so strong that Zhuo Yifeng couldn't help but want to get closer to this person and hold on to him. When this man had first taught Zhuo Yifeng how to cultivate, Zhuo Yifeng had asked to become his disciple, but the man in black had decisively rejected him. Later on, Zhuo Yifeng had purposely made a few slips of the tongue to test the black-clothed man's intentions. Each time, he had been doused with cold water by the black-clothed man. This time was no exception. From the looks of it, the black-clothed man was determined to have nothing to do with him. Perhaps once the black-clothed man had his fill of roasted game, he wouldn't appear again. Zhuo Yifeng couldn't help but sigh when he thought of this. People always have to rely on themselves. Never think of grabbing someone to rely on. The man in black seemed to see through Zhuo Yifeng's thoughts. As he ate, he spoke slowly, "Everyone in this world has their own destiny. Your destiny is to make yourself stronger." "Senior." Zhuo Yifeng sat in front of the black-clothed man, looked at him and asked, "Senior, what is your mission? Can you tell me?" "Don't ask what you can't ask." The black-clothed man stopped eating and stood up, looking at Zhuo Yifeng. Different from Zhuo Yifeng, the black-clothed man's eyes were dark, like a deep well without a trace of light. Even the whites of his eyes were covered with black shadows. Zhuo Yifeng also stood up. "Today, I will teach you a second set of wood attribute external techniques." As the black-clothed man spoke, he stretched out his hand and grabbed at the air. A green gaseous substance appeared in the black-clothed man's palm. The wild vine technique requires the presence of wild vines in the surroundings, but this chaotic leaf needle technique doesn't. The black-clothed man spread out his palm in front of Zhuo Yifeng, and a dark green leaf appeared in his palm. Use your own perception of the wood attribute in the air to control them, and condense them into the shape you want. The black-clothed man used his 2 hands to control the leaf in his hand. The lone leaf rapidly changed shape and number between the black-clothed man's hands. Sometimes it was as small as needles, densely packed together to form a spherical object. Sometimes it was just an ordinary flat leaf. There were dozens of them in a row, and their edges were as sharp as knives. With one look, one could tell that it was very powerful. "Did you see it clearly?" The black-clothed man looked at Zhuo Yifeng and asked. "Yes, I saw it clearly." Zhuo Yifeng nodded. The black-clothed man made a move with both hands, and the leaves in his hands flew out, hitting the huge rock in front of him. Then, with a series of cracking sounds, countless cracks appeared on the huge mountain rock, and then it collapsed and shattered into a pile of small stones. Zhui Feng looked at the scene in front of him, dumbfounded. He couldn't help but praise, so powerful. This is only a mid-level would attribute external spiritual force cultivation method. The black-clothed man said, you must practice it together with the wood attribute internal spiritual force cultivation method I taught you before. Otherwise, with your current spiritual force cultivation, you won't be able to expand your spiritual C. If your spiritual C is too weak, your spiritual force won't be enough, and you won't be able to support the use of a mid-level cultivation method. I will follow senior's teachings. Zhui Feng cupped his hands. Alright, that's it for today. When the black-clothed man turned to leave, he added, first practice the wild vine technique 100 times, and then practice the chaotic leaf needle technique. Senior, Zhui Feng called out to the black-clothed man from behind, I've already been chosen to participate in the other world trial. I'll probably be training tomorrow, so I won't be able to make barbecue for Senior for a year. I hope Senior takes care of yourself. The man in black stopped for a moment and said, you also have to take care. I hope that after a year, I will still be able to taste your craftsmanship. After saying that, the man in black walked away without stopping. I'll definitely return, Senior. I, Zhui Feng, promise you that I'll become stronger with my own strength. Zhui Feng looked at the black-clothed man's back as though he were making a vow. The black-clothed man reached out a hand, waved, and disappeared behind a large boulder. Zhui Feng let out a long breath, his gaze resolute as he looked at another boulder not far away. That boulder was covered in dense, wild vines. Zhui Feng walked over and began practicing the wild vine technique 100 times. When the black-clothed man arrived on the other side of the cliff, he saw a black-robed man standing there. Your Highness, the black-clothed man greeted with a bow. Sunan, there's no need for such formalities, Liamo said, turning back to Sunan. Sunan straightened up and removed the black cloth covering his face, revealing a resolute face and a pair of unusually bright eyes. Thank you, Your Highness, for arranging for me to meet Feng and pass on my techniques to him, Sunan said gratefully. It's no trouble at all. Zhui Feng's talent for cultivation isn't bad. With a little nurturing he won't be any weaker than you, Liamo praised sincerely. Sunan couldn't help but look gratified. After a moment's thought he said, I heard from Feng that he's been chosen to enter the alternate dimension. Although Sunan hadn't entered the foreign land before, he still had some understanding of the dangers there. Given Feng's current strength, I'm afraid he won't be able to return from the alternate dimension, Sunan said worriedly. If Zhui Feng were in the Southern College I could think of something, Liamo replied. But he's in the Central College and I can't overstep my authority. However, I'll be entering the alternate dimension as well, and I'll do my best to take care of him. Sunan was quite relieved to have Liamo's protection. Thank you, Your Highness, Sunan said. I've been in contact with Feng these past few days, and I've discovered that he harbors a deep hatred for you. If one day he offends Wangya, I, as an incompetent father, will first apologize on his behalf. Zhui Feng had always viewed Liamo as the enemy who had killed his father and clan, and his goal had always been to defeat Liamo to avenge his father. Zhui Feng had initially entered the Southern College, and it was only after discovering that Zhui Feng was in the Southern College that the Central College was modified. From this, one could see just how deep his hatred for Liamo ran. Sunan, have you no intention of reuniting with Zhui Feng? Liamo tilted his head slightly. Before completing my oath to the Beast King, I can't have any attachments. Sunan's face was as resolute as ever. Besides, there'll be too many things that I can't explain to them. In order to help Empress Xuetong find her true body, a war with the Silver Dragons was bound to break out sooner or later. Sunan's refusal to reunite with Zhui Feng and his sister was in fact an attempt to protect them. Liamo was naturally aware of this. Don't worry, Sunan. One day I'll have you reunite with your father, Liamo said slowly as he gazed at the sea of clouds. The next day the names of all 30 students from the 5 colleges were announced. The list was pasted on a wall in the plaza, with Liamo's name at the top, followed by Xuanhuan's. When the students heard the news they all rushed to the plaza to take a look. Boss, your name isn't on the list, a slender student by Guan Tianyu's side reported. Guan Tianyu clenched his fists and looked through the list several times. Indeed his name wasn't on it. Yunruoyan, Rong Yueshan, Pei Zhao, Zhui Feng and Zhao Gang were all on the list but not Guan Tianyu. The Southern College has the most spots, 10, the slender student exclaimed exaggeratedly. Our Northern College has 2 fewer spots than the Southern College. Even the useless college of the Central College has 2 spots. What a waste. The list showed that apart from Zhuo Yifeng, there was also a female student named Yan Hui. That female student would be able to enter one of the 3 colleges next year, and if she passed the entrance exam a year later, she would be able to graduate. If the portal hadn't opened a year earlier, Yan Hui would have escaped this calamity and become a rare elite of the Central College. Unfortunately, she was unlucky, and the portal had opened earlier than expected. The 6th elder had put in a lot of effort to include Yan Hui on the list. As for the Northern College, which required 8 spots, the 2nd elder naturally wasn't willing to send his grandson to his death. As a result, Rong Yueshan and Yi Qianying were on the list, but Guan Tianyu was nowhere to be found. Many of the students didn't understand why, and they were dissatisfied that they hadn't made it onto the list. Among them was the king of the Northern College, Guan Tianyu. Chapter 248. Guan Tianyu was used to taking advantage of others, and he didn't want to be taken advantage of. He didn't understand why so many new students were on the list, but he wasn't. His cultivation wasn't weak and he hadn't entered the 3 institutions yet, so he was qualified to be on the list. Guan Tianyu's gaze landed on Yun Ruoyan's name after Li Mo's, and a vicious glint appeared in his eyes. Last time he and Rong Yueshan had exchanged blows with Yun Ruoyan, and he knew that her cultivation wasn't weak, perhaps even higher than Rong Yueshan's. However, she was still far from his level. Even without the aid of the bracelet, Yun Ruoyan was a peak 7th rank blade master, whereas Guan Tianyu was already an 8th rank blade master, and he was in the midst of training with his own flying swords. Although on the surface, Guan Tianyu was only a single rank higher than Yun Ruoyan, this difference in cultivation was often enough to overwhelm her. Guan Tianyu was burning with rage and he immediately wanted to find someone to beat the crap out of. Sister Ruoyan, your name's on the list and it's at the very front. Lin Qingxue and Lin Qingchen pulled Yun Ruoyan into the crowd. Because she'd already known the result, Yun Ruoyan wasn't surprised at all. I've heard that there are treasures everywhere in this alternate dimension, and some of them are of extremely high quality. They're rare on the Xuanhuan continent, Lin Qingxue exclaimed. I've heard that too. Apparently, many spiritual herbs and herbs that are extinct on the Xuanhuan continent are the rarest and most common in this alternate dimension. Lin Qingchen's eyes were also filled with longing. But that's all hearsay. I don't think anyone from the academy has personally ventured into this alternate dimension. The elders have all returned from this alternate dimension, and it's said that some of the instructors from the 3 institutions have also returned from that dimension. At some point, Zongyang had appeared by their side, and he had clearly overheard their conversation. However, when those who have gone to the other dimension return, they're all tight-lipped about the specifics of the place, but the treasures they bring back are truly peerless, giving rise to the legend that the other dimension is filled with treasures. I don't know much about the other dimension either, but this time I'll be able to explore it for myself, Guan Ruliu explained when she saw everyone's gazes on her. That's right, I didn't expect that I, Zongyang, would have the opportunity to enter this alternate dimension. Zongyang couldn't help but laugh as he looked at his name behind Guan Ruliu's. Based on what they knew, those who entered the alternate dimension didn't have to return to the 5 colleges. Instead, they could choose to enter the 3 institutions and cultivate on their own, or they could graduate from Kongming Academy and establish themselves on the Xuanhuan continent. Yun Ruoyan clearly knew more about the alternate dimension than the others, but Liamo had told her that, in order to avoid panic, the elders had requested that the dangers of the alternate dimension be kept a secret. Furthermore, in order to appease the students who had been chosen, the information that had been released was all positive. Most of the students who had died in the alternate dimension had also been kept a secret by the elders. If everyone were to know that the odds of surviving in the alternate dimension were less than 1 in 10, and that there was even a chance that the entire group would be wiped out, it would be very difficult for anyone to enter the alternate dimension again. Hey you guys. As they conversed, a skinny student by Guan Tianyu's side called out to Yun Ruoyan's group. Didn't you hear our boss calling for you? Yun Ruoyan's group looked in the direction of the voice. Yun Ruoyan's group turned toward the source of the voice, only to see the tall and burly Guan Tianyu walking toward them. That tyrant's trying to cause trouble again. Lin Qingshua's expression was somewhat displeased. But why haven't I seen Rong Yueshan's group yet? Only then did Yun Ruoyan realize that Rong Yueshan, Pei Zio, and Yi Qianying were indeed nowhere to be seen. I'm talking to you guys. Are you deaf or mute? The skinny student by Guan Tianyu's side had a sharp and clear voice, instantly attracting the attention of a large group of people in the plaza. As soon as the crowd saw the tyrant of the Northern College, they spontaneously made way for them, forming a circle around Yun Ruoyan and Guan Tianyu. Based on past experience, Guan Tianyu was about to teach someone a lesson. Without the crowd blocking his path, Guan Tianyu quickly walked up to Yun Ruoyan. He looked down at Yun Ruoyan condescendingly and said disdainfully, "To think that someone like you would have the right to enter this dimension." Yun Ruoyan only smiled at him. Not wanting to waste her breath on him, she turned to leave. "What's wrong? Are you afraid that I'll expose you in front of so many people? Don't think that just because you're Master Mo's disciple that I won't dare do anything to you," Guan Tianyu laughed. "There's no one in Kongming Academy that I'm afraid of." Someone in the crowd seemed to have caught on to Guan Tianyu's hidden meaning. "I got it too," another person added. "What's he trying to expose Yun Ruoyan in front of so many people? Who cares? In any case, there's going to be a good show to watch today. Since this tyrant didn't make it onto the list, he's definitely not going to let the matter rest." Yun Ruoyan wasn't affected in the slightest by Guan Tianyu's words or the surrounding crowd's discussion. Yun Ruoyan wasn't afraid of trouble, but she knew that there were some things that she didn't need to waste her energy on. If she had the time to waste talking, she might as well prepare for tomorrow's training. "Do you really think that no one else knows about your relationship with Master Mo?" Guan Tianyu felt even more despised when he saw that Yun Ruoyan was ignoring him, and he didn't mince his words. "What nonsense are you spouting?" Lin Qingxue was furious. She had been about to leave with Yun Ruoyan, but now she stopped and turned to look at Guan Tianyu. This tall, burly fellow was like a chatterbox, and when he saw Lin Qingxue's anger, he smiled even more smugly. "I'm not spouting nonsense. I heard all of this from Yi Qianying and Rong Yueshan." Guan Tianyu crossed his arms as if he'd hit the nail on the head. "I'm sure there are some in the academy who don't know that, apart from being the head disciple of one of the elders, Master Mo has another identity in the secular world, the slaughtering king of the Li Kingdom." Guan Tianyu's words caused some of the crowd to sigh. Clearly this was the first time they'd heard of this news. Others weren't surprised, but they were still intrigued by Guan Tianyu's mysterious tone. According to the two of them, Master Mo and Yun Ruoyan had an ambiguous relationship when they were still in the Li Kingdom, and Master Mo even proposed marriage to Yun Ruoyan. Guan Tianyu continued, "I didn't expect that the two of them would become master and disciple after arriving at Kongming Academy. A master for a day, a father for life. Those who didn't know better would think that the two of them were indeed master and disciple. Those who didn't know better would think that they were master and disciple." Guan Tianyu's words were quite harsh, and he directly attacked Li Mo's reputation. For a moment, the surrounding crowd didn't even dare to continue the conversation. Not only was Master Mo's name resounding throughout Kongming Academy, but his reputation as the Slaughtering King was also known throughout the entire Xianhuan continent. Only someone like Guan Tianyu, who had a powerful backing and was a despicable tyrant, would dare to defame Li Mo so openly. Both Lin Qingxue and Lin Qingchen trembled with anger, but they didn't know how to refute Guan Tianyu's accusation. Although Guan Tianyu's words were harsh, they weren't baseless. The Lin sisters were well aware of the relationship between Yun Ruoyan and Li Mo, and they had been particularly surprised when Li Mo had accepted Yun Ruoyan as his disciple. Afterward, the Lin sisters had asked Yun Ruoyan about the matter, but Yun Ruoyan didn't want to talk about it, so they didn't press the matter. However, this matter had always been on the Lin sisters' minds. Now that Guan Tianyu had brought it up, they didn't know how to respond. "Guan Tianyu, do you know what you're saying?" The one who spoke was Guan Ruliu. She was the senior disciple of the Southern College, and although she wouldn't normally intervene in such trivial matters, this matter concerned Master Mo's reputation, and she had no choice but to speak up. "I, Guan Tianyu, never make things up. If I were lying, why wouldn't Yun Ruoyan dare to speak up?" Guan Tianyu looked at Yun Ruoyan, still trying to provoke her. This was Guan Tianyu's usual tactic. If he wanted to find trouble with someone, he would first try to provoke them, and when they retaliated, he would have the perfect opportunity to teach them a lesson. This was also one of Guan Tianyu's main methods of avoiding punishment after bullying someone. "Guan Tianyu." When everyone's eyes were on Yun Ruoyan, she finally spoke up. "Although I'm a new student, I'm well aware of your tendency to bully others whenever you're unhappy." Yun Ruoyan clasped her hands behind her back, her posture haughty. "You want to provoke me, so you're slandering Master Mo. No student of the Southern College will tolerate such behavior." Li Mo had quite a reputation at Kongming Academy, especially among the Southern College's students. Some of the Southern College's students had been furious when they'd heard Guan Tianyu's words, and now that they heard Yun Ruoyan's words, they were even more furious. This tyrant of the Northern College sure is audacious. It's one thing for her to bully her juniors, but this time she's slandering Master Mo. She really needs to be taught a lesson. So the Slaughtering King is actually Master Mo? That's amazing. Someone actually dared to defame such a powerful person? They must be tired of living. Yun Ruoyan smiled coldly. Since you want to fight with me, I'll grant you your wish, lest you come up with any other dirty ideas. She stepped forward, ready to receive Guan Tianyu's blow. Seeing that his goal had been achieved, Guan Tianyu didn't care about what the others said. Guan Tianyu's goal was simple. He wanted to injure Yun Ruoyan so that she wouldn't be able to participate in the training. If she couldn't participate, she wouldn't be able to enter the alternate dimension, and that extra spot would be his. Chapter 249. If I'd known you'd be so straightforward, I wouldn't have wasted so much saliva on you. Guan Tianyu smiled wickedly. Come, make your move. Yun Ruoyan hated Guan Tianyu to the core, and she didn't hesitate to send a fireball flying at him. After a period of practice, Yun Ruoyan's fireball technique had become much more proficient and powerful than before. The fireball she conjured was more than twice as large as before. Yun Ruoyan stretched out her hand, and the fireball left a long trail in the air as it flew toward Guan Tianyu. Guan Tianyu's face revealed a hint of surprise, and he quickly used his ice-attuned external spiritual technique. He pushed out his hands and green spiritual energy quickly condensed in front of him. He attempted to create an ice wall in the shortest time possible to block Yun Ruoyan's fireball. However, by the time Yun Ruoyan's fireball reached Guan Tianyu, his ice wall had only formed halfway. Half of the fireball was blocked by the ice wall, and the other half licked Guan Tianyu's lower body. Guan Tianyu's white academy uniform was instantly set ablaze by the fireball. Guan Tianyu's expression changed, and he hurriedly used one hand to condense water vapor to extinguish the flames on his robes. Haha, he's on fire. Lin Qingxue laughed gloatingly. That's what you get for spouting nonsense. Yun Ruoyan's hands remained behind her back, as if she hadn't expended any energy at all. Guan Tianyu, on the other hand, looked far more disheveled. How impressive. I saw Yun Ruoyan's fireball technique back in the cafeteria, but it wasn't this impressive. In less than a month, her fireball technique has more than doubled in power. Master Mo's disciple truly lives up to her name. This Guan Tianyu's really got himself a tough nut to crack. Guan Tianyu quickly extinguished the flames on his robes. Although he looked disheveled, he wasn't really injured. Boss, are you alright? The skinny student had fled as soon as the fireball had struck, and now he was running back. Get lost, useless thing. Exasperated, Guan Tianyu shoved the scrawny student aside. The scrawny student was shorter than Guan Tianyu by more than a head, and his arms weren't even half as thick as Guan Tianyu's. The shove sent him sprawling to the ground. Oh! The skinny student could not help but cry out in pain, but no one stretched out a hand to help him up. Instead, it caused a wave of laughter. What a good henchman trying to flatter him backfired. Haha, that's a good fall. I've long found him an eyesore. No, I find both of them an eyesore. Everyone laughed. Even the students of the Northern College mocked him. What a good henchman trying to flatter him. Guan Tianyu usually relied on the second elder's influence, not respecting his senior brothers and sisters at all. He didn't even care about his junior brothers and sisters, and did whatever he wanted in the Northern College. He was even more arrogant and insufferably arrogant towards students from other academies. Furthermore, this scrawny student was always acting like a tyrant by Guan Tianyu's side. Yun Ruoyan, I didn't expect you to improve so quickly. It seems I've underestimated you. Guan Tianyu straightened his robes and raised his head. Now it's my turn to attack and I won't hold back. With a wave of his hand, Guan Tianyu unleashed a row of icy blades at her. There were more than 10 ice blades in the row, and they fanned out in Yun Ruoyan's direction. It was clear that Guan Tianyu was using his full strength. Each of those ice blades was exceptionally sharp, and because there were so many of them, they had a large area of effect. Although Yun Ruoyan's fireball technique was powerful, her target was only Guan Tianyu, and it wouldn't affect anyone else around her. Everyone present broke out in a cold sweat when they saw Guan Tianyu use this technique. Guan Tianyu must have been so angry that he'd lost his mind. Was he going to affect everyone around him with such a large area of effect? In the blink of an eye, the dozen or so ice blades reached Yun Ruoyan. She wasn't strong enough to melt them all with a fireball. Even if she tried to, she would only be able to melt a small portion of the ice blades, and the rest wouldn't be able to be blocked. Around Yun Ruoyan, Lin Qingchen, and quite a few other students from the Southern College who didn't have high cultivations. It wouldn't have been difficult for her to protect herself, but it would have taken a lot of effort to protect others. Senior Sister Guan. Yun Ruoyan hurriedly glanced at Guan Ruliu, who understood and stepped forward to stand in front of Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan sent out 4 fireballs in a row, melting 4 of the ice blades. The remaining ones were already in front of the 2 of them. Suddenly, Guan Ruliu took out a vine from her waist and threw it at the ice blades in front of her. The vine grew as the wind blew, and it was as long and slender as a jade-green snake. It was like a whip with a life of its own, shattering 7 or 8 ice blades in a row. It was really amazing. It looks like the students from the Southern College aren't all that bad. In that case, I won't hold back. As Guan Tianyu spoke, he once again released a large number of ice blades. The crowd estimated that there were more than 20 of them. Guan Tianyu, Yun Ruoyan shouted. If you want to deal with me, you should be aiming at me alone. What's wrong with you now? By this time, Guan Ruliu had already begun to disperse the crowd behind her. However, there were too many people, and some who didn't know what was going on were still squeezing in to watch the show. She couldn't disperse the crowd in a short time. Can't you tell? I'm casting a net wide to catch a big fish. Guan Tianyu looked as if he didn't care about the consequences. Aren't you afraid of being punished by the Hall of Penitence if you hurt others? Yun Ruoyan asked harshly. Last time, Master Rong of the Northern College said in front of everyone that anyone who hurts a fellow student will be sent to the Hall of Penitence for punishment. Guan Tianyu laughed coldly. My ice blades will only hurt people, not kill them. As long as they don't die, I won't be in trouble. Cut the crap and take this. As soon as he finished speaking, Guan Tianyu pushed his palms forward, and the row of 20-odd ice blades flew toward Yun Ruoyan. Guan Ruliu, Zongyang, and the Lin sisters were all doing their best to disperse the crowd behind them. Yun Ruoyan was the only one blocking the ice blades, and she was forced to retreat again and again, buying time to form more fireballs. Everyone else was worried for Yun Ruoyan. It was impossible for her to deal with so many ice blades by herself. Yun Ruoyan didn't have time to think about anything else. All she could do was try her best. Just as Yun Ruoyan had melted a few of the ice blades and the rest were about to reach her, a wave of emerald leaves suddenly flew out of nowhere. Out of nowhere, a large number of dark green leaves suddenly flew out, and the number of those leaves was much more than the ice blades. The ice blades collided with the leaves, sending shards of ice and shards of green flying. Who's there? Guan Tianyu looked around. Who's the busybody? It's me. A low, masculine voice rang out from the crowd. Everyone turned toward the source of the voice, only to see a tall, burly youth about the same height as Guan Tianyu walk out from the crowd. This man was none other than Zhuo Yifeng, who had been transferred from the Southern College to the Central College. Brother Zhua. Lin Qingxue called out happily. You've come just in time. This guy's so annoying. Why don't you and Sister Ruoyan teach him a lesson together? Zhuo Yifeng's cold expression softened somewhat when he saw Lin Qingxue's smiling face. When he met Yun Ruoyan's gaze, he nodded slightly. Yun Ruoyan nodded back at him. The rapport between the two of them, honed through countless life and death battles, returned in an instant. At this moment, the two of them gave each other the feeling that they had become stronger. Although their cultivation as blade masters hadn't increased by much, the fact that they had both trained in external spiritual techniques had strengthened their connection to the spiritual energy around them. As a result, their auras had changed as well. The two of them stood side by side, one on the left and one on the right. They didn't speak, but they seemed to be in perfect harmony with one another. And where did you come from? Guan Tianyu asked. Ever since Zhuo Yifeng had entered the Central College, he hadn't gone out much, so many of the older students didn't recognize him. Boss, he's Zhuo Yifeng, the trash of the Central College. A skinny student leaned over to Guan Tianyu's side, holding his bent waist. Guan Tianyu snorted. I was wondering who it was, but it turns out to be the trash of the Central College. It doesn't matter who I am, Guan Tianyu replied. Zhuo Yifeng looked at Guan Tianyu with bright eyes. What's important is that you'll pay for bullying my friend. When Guan Tianyu met Zhuo Yifeng's unusually bright eyes, he paused for a moment before scoffing. So it's a beastkin brat. Since when did Kongming Academy accept such a lowly beastkin as a student? Is there no one else on the Qinyuan continent? As soon as Guan Tianyu finished speaking, a large swarm of tiny jade-green needles suddenly appeared in front of his eyes. Looking at the densely packed area, it was simply impossible to estimate their numbers. Guan Tianyu was someone who had undergone training in the alternate dimension, and he didn't panic at Zhuo Yifeng's sudden attack. He grabbed the skinny student by his side and used him as a shield. Oh my mother! What followed was a howl like a pig being slaughtered. More than half of the densely packed flying leaf needles were fixed on the skinny student's body. However, because the skinny student was too short and Guan Tianyu was too tall, Guan Tianyu was able to use the student as a shield, but half of the needles still landed on his body. Guan Tianyu looked at the needle-like leaves on his arms. Beads of blood seeped out from the edges of the leaves. Although the wounds were small, there were so many of them that the beads of blood quickly dyed both his arms red. The skinny student who had been used as a shield was even more frightening. His entire back was soaked in blood. Regardless of the severity of his injuries, it was clear that he was in a terrible state. Zhui Feng, you're really ruthless. Are you trying to kill me? Guan Tianyu's eyes burned with rage, but he didn't dare act recklessly. Zhui Feng's external spiritual technique was too strange and powerful, and Guan Tianyu had never seen anything like it before. He couldn't believe that the Central College had produced such a powerful individual. Guan Tianyu could sense that Zhui Feng's cultivation was lower than his, but this domineering external technique was more than enough to deal with him. What's going on here? Why are you all crowding around here instead of going to class? Rong Qinhai's voice suddenly sounded from outside the crowd. Master Rong, come quickly. Hearing Rong Qinhai's voice, Guan Tianyu immediately shouted, someone is committing murder here. Come and punish him. Chapter 250. Just as Guan Tianyu was being suppressed by Zhui Feng's domineering technique, Rong Tianhai suddenly appeared. When Guan Tianyu heard Rong Tianhai's voice, he hurriedly called for help, and the other students quickly made way for him. Rong Tianhai, you've come just in time. These people injured a fellow student. Hurry up and take them to the Hall of Penitence for punishment. Guan Tianyu's gaze was venomous as he looked at Xuanhuan and Zhui Feng. When Rong Tianhai saw Guan Tianyu and the skinny student covered in blood, he barked coldly, who did this? I've already said that anyone who harms a fellow student will be punished by the Hall of Penitence. Are you ignoring my words now? Where are the students of the Northern College? Rong Tianhai called out to the crowd, and quite a few of the Northern College's students immediately stepped forward. Take these assailants to the Hall of Penitence. Rong Tianhai ordered. Yes, Rong Tianhai. The students replied in unison, then walked toward Xuanhuan and Zhui Feng. Seeing this, Zhui Feng stepped in front of Xuanhuan. I was the one who injured them, and no one else has anything to do with it. Rong Tianhai looked at Guan Tianyu inquiringly. Who was the one who injured you? Guan Tianyu didn't answer immediately. Instead, he began calculating in his heart. Xuanhuan is Master Mo's disciple after all. If I capture her and alarm Master Mo, it'll only make matters worse and I won't be able to achieve my goal. Guan Tianyu's current plan was to make sure that one of the students on the list couldn't participate in the training. If they couldn't participate in the training, they wouldn't be able to participate in the expedition in a year's time. In that case, he could take their place. What he didn't want the most was to cause trouble, and he would have plenty of opportunities to teach those who had offended him a lesson in the future. The person who injured me was indeed this beastkin brat, and it has nothing to do with anyone else. Rong Tianhai nodded and gestured toward the Northern College students. Two of them stepped forward to detain Zhui Feng. Wait. Xuanhuan stepped forward to stop him. Her tone was calm, but her eyes were cold as she looked at Rong Tianhai. As an executor of the Hall of Penitence, are you going to judge someone based on a one-sided story? In Kongming Academy, the Hall of Penitence was in charge of punishing students who had committed serious crimes, and it rarely punished students. However, once they were punished, the punishment would definitely be very severe. That was why the students were rather respectful towards the Hall of Penitence. Lin Qingxue and Lin Qingchen also stepped forward and explained, just now Guan Tianyu not only wanted to injure someone, but he also wanted to implicate the innocent. It's all thanks to Sister Royan and Brother Zhuo's intervention that more people would have been injured. That's right, it was that tyrant of the Northern College who provoked us first. That's right, we were just defending ourselves. If they want to be punished, then they should be punished. That's the only way it's fair. Why don't we go find the first elder and the second elder to reason things out? The students of the Southern College protested one after another. Even the other three academies were discussing this unfairly. Rong Qinhai's an instructor from the Northern College. Surely he's not trying to side with Guan Tianyu? Guan Tianyu is the descendant of the second elder of the Northern College, and the Hall of Penitence is under the second elder's control. It's only natural that Rong Tianhai would be biased. That's right, it'd be strange if he wasn't biased. If not for the second elder's support, Guan Tianyu would have long since been locked up in the Hall of Penitence for his actions. Apart from the northern college's silence, the students of the other 3 colleges were almost all on one side. Afraid that he would incur the wrath of the students, Rong Tianhai ordered, "Take both Zhuo Yifeng and Guan Tianyu away. I'm also a participant in this matter, so if you want to take Zhuo Yifeng away, you'll have to take me away as well." Guan Tianyu had been looking for trouble with Yun Ruoyan, and Zhuo Yifeng had injured him because of her. No matter what, Yun Ruoyan couldn't just abandon her comrade. Rong Tianhai glanced sideways at Yun Ruoyan, his tone unfriendly. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." "All right, then take them away as well." Rong Tianhai waved his hand, and 2 more students from the northern college stepped forward to take Yun Ruoyan away. Yun Ruoyan stepped back and said coolly, "I can walk on my own." At the Hall of Penitence, Yun Ruoyan and Zhuo Yifeng were locked up in a wooden cell to await their punishment. The 2 of them sat facing each other, separated by a small wooden table. Because they hadn't seen each other in a long time, they didn't have much to say to each other. "Have all of you been well during this period of time?" Zhuo Yifeng asked after a long while. "Pretty good," Yun Ruoyan replied, then turned to Zhuo Yifeng. "I heard from Qingxue that you're highly regarded by the Central College, but I didn't expect your cultivation to improve so quickly. The physical technique you used against Guan Tianyu was wood-attuned, wasn't it?" Yun Ruoyan's eyes brightened at the mention of cultivation, and she immediately became a chatterbox. "That's right, it was a mid-level wood-attuned technique," Zhuo Yifeng replied. "I noticed that your fireball technique was quite impressive as well." Both of them were surprised by each other's improvements in cultivation. Lin Qingxue would often visit the Central College to find Zhuo Yifeng, and she would tell Yun Ruoyan about his situation. In turn, Zhuo Yifeng would try to understand Yun Ruoyan's situation through her. However, there were some things that Lin Qingxue didn't know, such as the situation of cultivation, that the 2 of them couldn't find out through her. "The fireball technique I used was only a low-level fire-attuned technique." Yun Ruoyan extended a hand, and a small ball of fire appeared in her palm. As Yun Ruoyan continued to infuse it with spiritual energy, the small ball of fire slowly turned into a small fireball, which grew larger and larger until it was the size of an infant's head. The fireball spun in Yun Ruoyan's palm, illuminating both of their faces with a fiery red light. "Amazing!" Zhuo Yifeng couldn't help but praise Yun Ruoyan's proficiency in controlling the fireball's size and movement. Zhuo Yifeng, who was also a spiritual cultivator, was well aware that it was much more difficult to control the elemental form of the fireball than to actually form it. Zhuo Yifeng had only recently learned a low-level wood-attuned technique, chaotic flying needles. He could form them, but he couldn't control them well. Back in the plaza, Zhuo Yifeng had only wanted to use this move to intimidate Guan Tianyu, but he couldn't stop himself from unleashing it. As a result, the 2 of them had been injured. Fortunately, his martial arts were still shallow. According to the black-clothed senior's performance that night, this disorderly flying leaves needles technique was definitely capable of splitting mountains and splitting rocks. It wasn't as simple as just bleeding a little. Yun Ruoyan slowly clenched her fist, extinguishing the flame in her palm. She looked at Zhuo Yifeng with a smile. "This time, both you and I have been chosen to enter the alternate dimension. I hope that we can still face danger together just like before." Yun Ruoyan looked at Zhuo Yifeng with hope in her eyes. It wasn't easy to find a partner who she could trust and work well with. Even though Yun Ruoyan knew of the grudge between Zhuo Yifeng and Liu Mo, she still tried to pull Zhuo Yifeng along. After all, teaming up with him in the alternate dimension was undoubtedly the best guarantee of their safety. "I'm used to being alone," Zhuo Yifeng replied after a long silence. Like everyone else, Zhuo Yifeng didn't know much about the alternate dimension, and he didn't know as much about its dangers as Yun Ruoyan did. "Zhuo Yifeng, listen to me," Yun Ruoyan tried to persuade him. Yun Ruoyan was still trying to convince him. "Apart from the treasures that everyone says are everywhere in this alternate dimension, there's even more danger. If you come with us, you don't need to persuade me," Zhuo Yifeng interrupted her. "I've already made up my mind." Yun Ruoyan wanted to continue, but she was interrupted by a familiar male voice. "Yin." Liu Mo had appeared outside the wooden cell, his hands behind his back. Liu Mo. Yun Ruoyan stood up and quickly walked to the door of the cell. She smiled. "I knew you'd come to save us." Liu Mo reached his hand into the cell and smacked Yun Ruoyan on the head. "Call me master." Yun Ruoyan rubbed her forehead, a little aggrieved as she glared at Liu Mo. She didn't know when Liu Mo had developed the habit of smacking her on the head, but Yun Ruoyan had protested more than once. Her protests, however, were clearly of no use to a certain someone. Seeing that Liu Mo's expression wasn't good, Yun Ruoyan knew that this wasn't the time to lash out, and she could only obediently call him master. "Open the door," Liemo said to one of the guards beside him. The guard immediately bowed and opened the door. Yun Ruoyan walked out of the cell. Seeing that Zhuo Yifeng was still sitting on a wooden stool, she called for him to come out. Liemo clasped his hands behind his back and turned to leave, speaking slowly as he did so. "We'll begin training tonight and we'll gather in the plaza at dusk. Anyone who's late will be disqualified." Zhuo Yifeng's fists clenched tightly by his side as he stood up and walked out of the cell. Keep up," Liemo instructed as he strode out of the room. Yun Ruoyan and Zhuo Yifeng followed Liemo out of the Hall of Penitence. Just as they were about to step out of the door, a figure that the three of them didn't welcome appeared. Senior Liemo. Rong Tianhai blocked in front of Liemo. "These two students have broken the rules, and you're taking them away without even informing me? Aren't you disrespecting the Hall of Penitence a little too much?" When Liemo had come to take Yun Ruoyan and Zhuo Yifeng away, the guards in the Hall of Penitence hadn't dared to stop him. Instead, they had immediately notified Rong Tianhai, who had hurried over to stop him. Liemo didn't want to waste time with Rong Tianhai. "The expedition will begin in a year's time, and the training will begin tonight. If you keep them here, who's going to take their place? Do you want to go?" Rong Tianhai didn't have the authority to know much about the expedition, but he was, after all, an administrator at Kongming Academy, and he had been there for some time. It was easy to guess that the expedition wasn't a good place to go, so he chose to remain silent. "If you don't want to, then don't waste everyone's time here." As Liemo spoke, he circled around Rong Tianhai and continued on his way, treating Rong Tianhai as if he were invisible. Rong Tianhai looked at Liemo's back and thought angrily, "What are you so proud of? If you ever fall into the hands of the Hall of Penitence again, I won't show you any mercy." Chapter 251. As Rong Tianhai thought to himself, he looked toward the western side of the Hall of Penitence. There was a naturally formed valley there, and it was surrounded by a natural formation. Anyone who violated the heavenly punishment would have to go there to be punished. The last time the heavenly punishment formation had been activated was to punish Liemo for opening the all-seeing mirror without permission. For some reason, Rong Tianhai had a feeling that Liemo would be punished again sooner or later. As the three of them walked out of the Hall of Penitence, Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but look back. She hadn't taken a good look when she first entered, but now she saw a plaque hanging above the entrance. The words Hall of Penitence were written on the plaque. Although the words were strong and forceful, there wasn't anything particularly special about it. What caught her attention, however, was what seemed to be a sculpture behind the plaque, beneath the eaves of the roof. Because the sculpture was hidden in the shadows, it didn't attract much attention. However, Yun Ruoyan's gaze was drawn to it. As she walked forward, she infused her eyes with spiritual energy, trying to improve her vision. She could finally see the sculpture clearly. It was a four-legged serpentine creature covered in scales, but it was missing its head. Because it was missing its head, Yun Ruoyan couldn't tell whether it was a dragon or some other kind of monster, but she felt that it was a little strange. "Hey!" Yun Ruoyan turned back to look, but Liemo suddenly stopped in front of her, and she bumped into his back. Yun Ruoyan turned back to look up at him, and Liemo turned back to look down at her. Their gazes met, and Yun Ruoyan subconsciously clutched her forehead. "If you were to knock me now, I'd definitely fall out with you." "Miss Yun," Zhuo Yifeng said from the side. "I'll go back and make some preparations, then head straight to the plaza." Before Yun Ruoyan could respond, Zhuo Yifeng had already left for the Central College. Yun Ruoyan looked at Zhuo Yifeng's back and couldn't help but sigh. Was there really no way to resolve the enmity between him and Liemo? A few questions about Liemo that Yun Ruoyan had deliberately avoided popped up in her mind. There had to be a reason why Liemo, as the Beast King's son, had slaughtered so many beastkin. If Liemo could find a way to resolve the grudge between Zhuo Yifeng and Liemo didn't elaborate, and it wasn't appropriate for her to press the matter. Just as Yun Ruoyan was deep in thought, she felt a sudden pain in her forehead. "Liemo." Yun Ruoyan clutched her forehead, about to explode. "I heard you volunteered to enter the Hall of Penitence." Liemo's tone was serious. "So what if I did?" Yun Ruoyan rubbed her forehead as if she hadn't done anything wrong. Yun Ruoyan's fearless demeanor gave Liemo a headache. He frowned. "Do you know where the Hall of Penitence is?" As she walked past Liemo, she deliberately nudged him with her elbow. "Don't be so willful in the future," Liemo warned from behind. "I can't promise that," Yun Ruoyan replied without turning her head. I can't disregard my friends just to protect myself. If you wanted to help your friends, you could have come to me. There's no need to put yourself in the same position. Li Mo's heart was filled with anger. No one knew better than him what kind of place the Hall of Penitence was. If not for him, and if not for the fact that the training was just around the corner, how could Xuanhuan have emerged unscathed from the Hall of Penitence? It was a place that even Li Mo would lose a layer of his skin if he entered. What if you weren't there? Xuanhuan asked. What if I couldn't find you in time? What if this person isn't someone you're willing to help? Li Mo looked at the stubborn woman in front of him, his heart a little sullen. Why couldn't she just be obedient all the time? Whenever she wasn't obedient, Li Mo almost went crazy. So you were afraid that I wouldn't be willing to help Zhuo Yifeng, so you accompanied him to the Hall of Penitence. Li Mo's eyes darkened even more. Xuanhuan finally stopped, not knowing what to say. Do you think I'm so narrow-minded? Of course, Xuanhuan didn't think that Li Mo was a narrow-minded person, but she cared too much about Zhuo Yifeng to take the risk. You're sure that I care about you, so you're using yourself to provoke me. As soon as Li Mo received news that Xuanhuan had been brought to the Hall of Penitence, he had immediately flown over to save her. The entire process had taken less than 5 minutes. Li Mo smiled bitterly. This girl was determined to get him. At that moment, Li Mo suddenly understood why his mother, Empress Shuetong, had forbidden him from lust. Lust was a weakness, and once it was grasped, it was an extremely dangerous thing to do. Wei Hai's kidnapping of Xuanhuan was the best example. That time, it was an outsider who'd taken advantage of his weakness, but this time, Xuanhuan had personally come to do so to save another man. No matter how well-mannered Li Mo was, he couldn't help but feel angry. Xuanhuan knew that she was in the wrong, but she didn't regret her actions. If she were to encounter such a situation again, she would do the same thing. Alright, go back and prepare. Don't be late for the evening gathering, Li Mo said when Xuanhuan didn't respond. Seeing that Xuanhuan wasn't responding, Li Mo began flying toward the southern tower. Hey! By the time Xuanhuan made a sound, Li Mo had already flown far away. He's really angry now. As Xuanhuan watched Li Mo fly further and further away, she couldn't help but feel vexed. Sister Ruoyan, are you alright? Xuanhuan didn't walk far from the female dormitory before she ran into the Lin sisters. The two of them tugged at Xuanhuan's sleeves and examined her from head to toe, as if afraid that she might be missing a piece of flesh. As it turned out, after Xuanhuan and Zhuo Yifeng had been taken away, the two sisters had heard many frightening stories about the Hall of Penitence. They said that the most common punishment for students there was the crippling of their cultivation, or even the breaking of their fingers and hands. The two sisters had been so frightened that they immediately sought out Li Mo for help. I'm fine. Xuanhuan hurriedly replied. Where's Brother Zhuo and Master Mo? Why aren't they with you? Zhuo Yifeng has returned to the Central College, and Li Mo has returned to the Southern College. As Xuanhuan spoke, she pulled the two sisters toward a small path by the cliff. Xuanhuan didn't know how long this training would take, and she had a few things to tell her sisters. Within the Northern College's high tower, 8 students, including Rong Yueshan, Pei Zio, and Yi Qianying, were being lectured by the second elder. The second elder only told them to pay attention to their own safety, and that survival was their top priority. Because he couldn't make it clear, some of his words were a little vague. The 8 students found it strange that the usually stern, cold, and taciturn second elder had suddenly become so wishy-washy. Pei Zio, the second elder called out. I'm here. Pei Zio stepped forward to receive his instructions. The second elder extended his hand and handed a flute-like object to Pei Zio. Pei Zio's eyes lit up. This flute-like object was the family heirloom, the spear that had been taken away from him when he entered the Northern College. Pei Zio took the cloud-piercing spear and bowed to the second elder in excitement before retreating. The second elder returned the spiritual weapons to the students one by one, then sent them back to prepare for the upcoming training. Just as Pei Zio and the others left, Rong Tianhai brought Guan Tianyu to the Northern Tower to seek an audience with the second elder. Grandfather. Guan Tianyu knelt down as soon as he saw the second elder. Tianyu, what are you doing? The second elder asked. If you have something to say, get up first. I'm not getting up. Guan Tianyu remained kneeling stubbornly. Grandfather, if you don't agree to let me participate in the training and participate in the expedition in a year's time, I won't get up. Nonsense, the second elder roared. The slots have already been decided, so what are you doing? I don't care. My cultivation and talent aren't inferior to Yun Ruoyan's at all, so why can't I go? Tianyu asked. I'm your grandson, so why are you giving this opportunity to others but not me? There's no why. If I say you can't go, then you can't go. Get down. The second elder roared. Tianhai, drag him down and keep an eye on him until everyone else leaves. Rong Tianhai dragged Tianyu away by force, then returned to the second elder to report the conflict that had occurred between Tianyu and Yun Ruoyan's group. This child is intentionally causing trouble for others in order to obtain a slot. It's time for him to suffer a little, the second elder said. Rong Tianhai was a little surprised by the second elder's words, because the second elder's motto had always been to never suffer a loss. Tianyu had only become so domineering because of the second elder's influence. This time, however, Tianyu had clearly suffered a loss, and the second elder had actually said that he deserved it. This was the first time Rong Tianhai had encountered such a situation. Master, I don't understand, Rong Tianhai said. Tianhai, I've always valued you highly, but I never allowed you to participate in the expedition. Have you ever resented me like Tianyu? I did, Rong Tianhai replied truthfully. Gradually, I found out that Master felt that my cultivation wasn't high enough, and was trying to protect me. In fact, I've always been working hard, hoping that one day I'd be strong enough to enter the alternate dimension and obtain treasures for Master. Tianhai, I understand your filial piety, but I hope that you can give up on the idea of going to the alternate dimension, the second elder said impolitely. Tianyu's father was a 9th-rank blade master, infinitely close to becoming a sword saint, on par with Li Mo, but he died in the alternate dimension as well. So, before you become a sword saint, don't even think about going to the alternate dimension. The second elder's words caused Rong Tianhai's forehead to break out in a cold sweat. Finally, the doubts he'd had for so long had been answered. For a long time, the senior brothers and senior sisters who went to another world rarely came back. The explanation given by the Elder Council was that the missing students obtained a treasure and went into seclusion to silently cultivate a higher cultivation method. But from the second elder's words, it seemed likely that all of them had perished in the alternate dimension. Evening finally arrived, and the students on the list arrived on time to be called. Because Li Mo was the only instructor participating in the expedition, he was in charge of the training. Li Mo took out a list of names and began to call out names. Zongyang. Zongyang. Li Mo called out several times but there was no response. Master Mo, Guanrulia suddenly said. At this time Guanrulia suddenly said, Zongyang was injured by the ice blade so he can't participate in the training. Chapter 252. As it turned out, while Tianyu and Yun Ruoyan were dueling in the plaza, Zongyang had been helping to evacuate the students. One of Tianyu's ice blades had coincidentally struck Zongyang's back. As soon as the blade entered his flesh, it didn't leave a large wound, nor did it cause any excruciating pain. At first, Zongyang didn't think much of the injury so he didn't pay it much heed. However, 2 to 4 hours later, the place where he was stabbed by the ice blade became abnormally cold. Cold air seeped into Zongyang's body through the wound, causing him to shiver. Suddenly, Zongyang couldn't even get out of bed. Guanruliu reported the situation to Li Mo in detail. Of the 30 spots, only 29 were left. There was still one more spot to go. Li Mo immediately sent a messenger to explain the situation to the elders and had them discuss how to allocate another slot for the Dragon King. Not long after, the first, second, and fifth elders arrived. As for the other 3 elders, one pretended to be deaf and mute, while the other pretended to be in seclusion. As the 3 elders discussed quietly on the dais in front of the plaza, Li Mo stood by the side, waiting for the results. We're still missing one slot, so let's have one of our 3 colleges take it, the first elder proposed. The 5th elder lowered his head and didn't reply. At this moment he felt some regret. How could he have been so obedient? In the future he would have to learn to be more tactful like the other 3 elders. Zongyang is from the Southern College and since he can't go, we'll have to send someone from the Southern College to take his place, the second elder proposed. Second elder, Li Mo responded coolly. Zongyang is from the Southern College, but he was injured by Tianyu from the Northern College. Shouldn't the Northern College be held responsible? I'm aware of that, the second elder replied nonchalantly. The second elder said indifferently, 2 people from the South Courtyard were also injured, and one of them is now bedridden. Aren't Weifeng and Yun Ruoyan still standing there? Since it's a duel, it's one thing if you're not as skilled as the other, but why are you talking about taking responsibility? The second elder was famous for being unreasonable, and even Liemo couldn't reason with him. It seemed that the Southern College would have to send someone to take his place. But at this moment, a figure walked into the square. He passed through the square and headed straight for the high platform. This person was none other than the person who had injured Zongyang Guantianyu. He had originally been grounded in the Northern College, but he had inadvertently overheard the Northern College students talking about Zongyang's injury and the selection of another student to replace him. How could Guantianyu let go of such an opportunity? He immediately found a way to escape and ran all the way here. "Elders, please wait," Guantianyu called out, panting as he walked toward the platform. The gazes of the students below, the three elders and Liemo were all drawn to him. "Tianyu, what are you doing here?" The second elder stood up and shouted at Guantianyu. Guantianyu acted as if he hadn't heard the second elder's words. "Elders, I was the one who injured Zongyang. If there's anyone to replace him, it should be me." "You brat, I've really spoiled you rotten. What are you doing here? Hurry up and go back," the second elder yelled anxiously. Guantianyu had already walked up to the platform and knelt down in front of the elders. "Tianyu, I feel that my cultivation and experience aren't inferior to any of my fellow disciples. I should have been chosen in the first place." Guantianyu straightened his back, appearing unusually stubborn in the face of his grandfather's angry glare. "How dare you come here to make a fool of yourself?" The second elder's face was red with anger, and he reached out to pull Guantianyu away. "Come back with me." "Wait, second elder." Liemo stepped forward, standing between the second elder and Guantianyu. Although Zongyang's cultivation isn't very high, he's still a 6th-rank blade master. For Guantianyu to be able to beat him until he's bedridden shows that his cultivation isn't weak at all. Liemo's lips curled up slightly as he looked at the second elder. "Since he's so eager to gain experience, why don't you give him a chance, second elder?" Guantianyu was a little surprised to see Liemo plead on his behalf. "That's right, grandfather, since Master Emo has said so, please let me go. If you don't let me go, I'll kneel here until I die." The second elder only had this one treasure left, and he naturally couldn't bear to see him enter the den of tigers and wolves. He glared furiously at Liemo, his eyes almost spitting fire. "Guantianyu," the first elder finally spoke. "Aren't you afraid of the dangers in the other world?" "Hee hee." Guantianyu laughed. "I've been on an expedition with the 3 institutions for many years now. What haven't I encountered?" Guantianyu declared proudly. "Besides, the more dangerous the place, the more opportunities there will be. I believe that I have the ability to avoid danger and seize the opportunity." "Good, you're ambitious." The 5th elder smiled. As expected of the second elder's bloodline, it seems that you really have to go to the alternate dimension. "Of course." Guantianyu was very pleased with the 5th elder's words. He raised his head and spoke so loudly that everyone present could hear him. "In that case, the first elder has no choice but to fulfill your wish." The first elder saw that Guantianyu was very determined, and since the training was about to begin, there was no time to reselect students. Just like that, Guantianyu had successfully secured an opportunity to enter the alternate dimension for himself. He excitedly walked towards the students below, and was quickly surrounded by the other 8 students of the Northern College. "Senior Guan, you're too kind. From now on we'll have to rely on each other." Rong Yueshan smiled. "Of course. I'll be sure to take care of all of you." Guantianyu laughed heartily. He was in a very good mood, having gotten what he wanted. However, when he turned around he met Yun Ruoyan's gaze. Her gaze was cold and mocking, as if he'd done something utterly ridiculous. Yun Ruoyan's gaze only glanced at him once, but Guantianyu was infuriated. If not for the fact that there were still a few elders on the platform, he would have exploded on the spot. Up on the platform, the second elder was furious, but there was nothing he could do about it. His own grandson was desperately trying to get involved in this mess. In the end, all of the second elder's anger turned into helplessness. He sat down on his chair and said, "First elder, 5th elder, are you trying to sever my bloodline?" "Second elder, I think you should be more optimistic," the 5th elder consoled. The 5th elder comforted him. "Although the trial was extremely dangerous, it's not as if there were no survivors. Those who returned from the alternate dimension, including you and me, are all influential figures on the Xuanhuan continent. Your grandson isn't one to settle down, and he won't rest until you let him go." The second elder didn't respond to the 5th elder's words. "Moreover, Master Emo is the one leading the expedition this time. If he's willing to take care of you, it'll be much safer." The 5th elder glanced at Liemo. The second elder couldn't help but look at Liamo, but he couldn't bring himself to ask for his help. Liamo will do his best to take care of every student, Liamo replied coolly. Liamo said coolly, then cupped his fists at the first elder. Now that everyone's here, would you like to speak, elders? The first elder waved his hand. It's getting late. Let's begin the training. Liamo cupped his fists once more and bowed to the three elders, then gestured to Xuanhuan, Mo Yun, and the other senior students. The four of them stepped forward and set up a teleportation array. This time we'll be entering a mid-grade alternate dimension. You may now enter, Liamo announced. Guan Tianyu was the first to step into the trial. Rong Yueshan, Yi Qianying, Pei Zio, and the rest of the Northern College's students followed closely behind. Yun Ruoyan and the others didn't rush. Only after the students from the other colleges had entered did Yun Ruoyan enter the trial with the Southern College's students, with Liamo right behind her. Ever since they'd entered the plaza, Liamo had intentionally avoided making eye contact with Yun Ruoyan. In a fit of pique, Yun Ruoyan ignored Liamo as well. Although the two of them entered the teleportation array one after the other, they didn't communicate with each other. The moment Yun Ruoyan stepped into the array, she was stunned by the scene before her. Tall trees, flower buds the size of 2 human heads, and stalks of grass as thick as an arm. The other students were just as stunned as Yun Ruoyan. Is this the mid-grade trial? It's so magical. One of the students exclaimed. What's so strange about that? There are all sorts of strange creatures in the intermediate trial ground. There are even more amazing things to come. Because Guan Tianyu had been to the mid-grade trial before, he wasn't the least bit surprised. Yun Ruoyan's attention, however, was drawn to a half-opened flower. The flower was pure white, and it emanated a fragrance that Yun Ruoyan was very familiar with. Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but step forward and take a sniff. It was the fragrance of peach blossoms. The fragrance of this flower was different from the fragrance of ordinary peach blossoms. It carried a sweet fragrance that made one feel relaxed and happy. It was actually the same fragrance as the peach blossom forest in the backyard of the Lin mansion. Puzzled, Yun Ruoyan took another step forward to take a closer sniff. Suddenly the flower's color and shape changed. The pure white from before seemed to have been splashed with blood ink, instantly turning into a scarlet red. In the blink of an eye, several slimy tongue-like vines grew out of the scarlet petals and lapped at Yun Ruoyan. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. By the time Yun Ruoyan reacted, those slippery vines were already right in front of her. Be careful. Liamo's voice suddenly rang out from behind Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan felt a large hand wrap around her waist, and she quickly retreated, narrowly dodging the slippery vines. Seeing this, Zhui Feng took out his bow and slashed at the rattan with the bowstring. Zhui Feng's bowstring was extremely sharp, and in an instant he cut through a section of the vine. After the vine was injured, it quickly retreated back into the flower. Then, in front of everyone's eyes, its petals retracted, and its stem shrunk back into the soil. Look! Guan Ruliu exclaimed, looking at the ground. The rest of the students followed her gaze to see that the section of vine that Zhui Feng had cut off was wriggling back into the soil like a snake. Chapter 253. What's that? Yun Ruoyan asked, still in Liamo's arms. A bewitching flower. As Liamo spoke, he stretched out his other hand, his middle finger and index finger pointing at the stem of the flower that was trying to burrow into the ground. Yun Ruoyan saw a purple flame appear on Liamo's fingertip and shoot toward the stem. The stem was engulfed by the purple flame, and in a few moments, it was reduced to ashes. The crowd had never seen such a strange creature before, and they couldn't help but be shocked. What the hell was that? Yi Qianying had been by Yun Ruoyan's side, and Pei Zio had managed to pull her away when the flower had attacked her. Yi Qianying was now hiding behind Pei Zio, her face pale. That's a bewitching flower. Guan Tianyu had clearly seen this flower before. Bewitching flowers have the ability to bewitch people. Different people can smell different scents from the flower, and these scents are the ones that have left a deep impression on them or that they like the most. Senior brother Guan, since you knew about this flower's power, why didn't you warn us just now? Guan Ruliu asked coolly. She and Zhong Yang were in the same cohort, and because of Guan Tianyu, Zhong Yang couldn't participate in the trial. Although Guan Ruliu didn't say anything, her dissatisfaction with Guan Tianyu was quite obvious. You can't blame me for that, Guan Tianyu replied. The bewitching flower takes a different form every time it appears, and I can't predict its appearance. Besides, isn't Master Imo here? Guan Tianyu glanced at Liamo. He wasn't lying, but his tone and demeanor were quite displeasing. Guanrulius snorted coldly and ignored him. Everyone be careful. By then Liemo had already put Yunruoyan down. Now everyone follow me. Don't look or touch anything. As soon as he finished speaking, Liemo turned and walked off in a certain direction, and the others hurriedly followed behind him. Although everyone was puzzled, no one asked. Instead, they hurriedly followed Liemo's footsteps. Liemo led the group through the tall forest. About an hour later, they arrived in front of a treehouse. There were about 7 or 8 trees that were similar in size to each other. About 50 to 60 feet above the ground, there was a man-made wooden house. One of the trees near the edge had a gap cut in its trunk for climbing. Liemo could have flown up on his sword, but for the sake of demonstration, he nimbly climbed up the tree trunk with his hands and feet. The rest of them followed his example and entered the treehouse one after another. The treehouse was very large, and it was more than enough to accommodate 30 people. After everyone entered the treehouse, they sat together and waited for Liemo to speak. At this time the sky was completely dark. Because they had just entered a new environment, everyone seemed very excited and not the slightest bit tired. Are we going to rest here tonight? A student asked in a low voice. Don't tell me it's a mixed room, a female student asked. We're here to train. Do you think we're still at Kongming Academy or at home? This is the best we can do, Guan Tianyu replied. That's right, aren't you from the Southern College a little too delicate? Rong Yueshan laughed. We might be delicate, but Miss E from the Northern College has been hiding behind someone else all this time, the female student from the Southern College retorted. The Southern College girl who had just spoken retorted, I heard that Miss E is the concubine of the Crown Prince of the Li Kingdom. Could it be that young Master Pei is the concubine's guard? Xianxia had been following behind Pei Zio like a little bird. Although the two of them hadn't acted too intimately, it still seemed unusual to outsiders. The female student from the Southern College mocked Pei Zio. As soon as Pei Zio heard this, he immediately explained, the Crown Prince's concubine and the Peis are family friends, and we've always been as close as brother and sister. There's no need for some people to slander us. As Pei Zio spoke, he glanced at Yunruoyan seemingly unintentionally. Yunruoyan sat cross-legged in the middle of the group, looking around her, paying no attention to the bickering going on around her. She was observing her surroundings. The treehouse was empty. There was nothing in it. There were no beds, no stove, and this was just a temporary place to rest for the night. Whether or not I'm slandering you, I'm sure everyone knows. The bickering continued. Sister, Xianxia finally spoke. Xianxia finally spoke. What are you talking about? I don't understand at all. Can you speak more clearly? The female student from the Southern College wasn't from the Li Kingdom, so she wasn't afraid of this so-called concubine. However, just as she was about to speak again, Liemo interrupted her. Be quiet. What I'm about to say next is very important, and I'll only say it once, so listen carefully. This is the campsite that the students of the 3 institutions set up when they come here to train. Liemo continued, as you can see, the environment here is very different from what you've seen before. Whether it's the trees, plants, animals, or magical beasts, they're all many times larger than what we're used to. Master Emo, Guanrulius suddenly interrupted. Why didn't you tell us about this place before entering? You know about that bewitching flower, right? If you'd warned us beforehand, Junior Yun wouldn't have been so easily bewitched. Guanrulius' question mirrored everyone else's. Everyone felt that this training had been rushed, and they hadn't known anything about this place before entering. The first time they'd entered, they'd at least been given a storage pouch with a map inside. This time, however, there was nothing at all. They'd thought that with Liemo around there wouldn't be a need for a map, but Liemo's next words completely shattered that naive notion. The reason why the training was rushed and didn't give you any time to prepare is because the trip to the alternate dimension in a year's time is also very rushed, Liemo explained. Although we know that the portal will open in a year's time, we don't know exactly which day or time it will take place. Perhaps it'll open in the evening or in the middle of the night, when you're sleeping soundly. In that case, you'll have to enter the alternate dimension as quickly as possible. Liemo's inky gaze swept across the crowd before he continued, I'm also completely unfamiliar with the alternate dimension, and from what the elders have described, it's different. From this, we can deduce that the alternate dimension we enter is different every time. As such, we must have the ability to deal with unfamiliar environments. This time we'll treat this alternate dimension as a training ground. The students nodded in agreement. Yunruoyan looked at Liemo. For the first time she felt that he wasn't a prince, but an instructor at Kongming Academy. Also, this trial will be completely different from the one you fought for when you first entered the academy, Liemo continued sternly. Last time, when you were fighting for a place in the academy, no one was there to stop you from fighting each other. However, this trial is primarily to temper your abilities, and there's no need for you to fight each other. Tempering oneself, improving one's cultivation, obtaining useful spirit medicines, spirit grasses, magic beast cores, and relying on one's own strength to survive is the ultimate goal of this trial. Liemo then began to divide the students into 10 groups of 3, and each group would head off in a different direction. After 7 days they would return to the academy. What surprised Xuanhuan was that Liemo had actually put her, Zhuifeng and Liemo in the same group. Xuanhuan wasn't surprised that Liemo would be in the same group as Liemo, but she was very surprised that Zhuifeng would be in the same group as him. The irreconcilable enmity between the two of them made them seem like natural enemies. Zhuifeng had even tried to kill Liemo before, but his attack had been deflected by Liemo's barrier of spiritual energy. Even so, according to Xuanhuan's understanding of Liemo, he wouldn't easily let off anyone who had tried to kill him. In Xuanhuan's opinion, Liemo was already giving Zhuifeng face by not punishing him. Liemo wouldn't use this opportunity to deal with Zhuifeng, would he? For some reason Xuanhuan suddenly had this thought, but almost as soon as it appeared, she rejected it. With Liemo's abilities, dealing with Zhuifeng would be far too easy. In that case, was Liemo really taking care of Zhuifeng? That should be the case. As Xuanhuan thought about it, she realized that she'd really been wrong about Liemo, and that she'd been gauging a gentleman's heart with her own yardstick. Her anger towards Liemo instantly dissipated, and her gaze softened as she looked at Liemo. Liemo could sense the change in Xuanhuan, and he couldn't help but feel a little unhappy. Xuanhuan had thrown a tantrum at him for half a day because of another man, and now, that tantrum had been instantly extinguished because of this man. This was something that Liemo was very displeased about. Master Emo, I'd like to be in the same group as you, Rong Yueshan suddenly spoke up. Yes, I'd like to be in the same group as Master Emo. Me too. After Rong Yueshan made the first move, the rest of the students began to make similar requests. Everyone knew that being in the same group as Liemo would increase their chances of survival, so they weren't satisfied with Liemo's decision to put them in the same group as Xuanhuan and Pei Zio. Here's a teleportation scroll. Liemo didn't pay attention to their requests. Instead, he waved his hand lightly on the wooden floor, and a stack of scrolls appeared under his palm. As soon as the students heard that these were legendary scrolls, their eyes lit up. Chapter 254. Even Xuanhuan couldn't help but stare in shock at the stack of scrolls on the floor. There were at least 20 of those scrolls. Everyone knew that teleportation scrolls had long since disappeared, so how could so many of them have suddenly appeared? Are these really teleportation scrolls? Many of the students stared at the scrolls in front of them in disbelief. Xuanhuan picked up one of the scrolls and immediately felt a strange wave of spiritual energy emanating from it. So they really are teleportation scrolls. However, Xuanhuan found that while the scroll was genuine, the materials were all new, and didn't seem to be something that had been passed down from ancient times. Puzzled, Xuanhuan turned to look at Liemo along with everyone else. These are teleportation scrolls that the First Elder and I created after a long period of research, Liemo began. I'll set up an array in the treehouse that's connected to the scrolls, so that when you're in danger, you'll have to use the scrolls to return to the treehouse immediately. But because of the time constraints, I was only able to make 27 scrolls. If you're in my group, you won't be able to obtain the scrolls. I want the scrolls. Guan Tianyu was the first to pick up a teleportation scroll. The environment here is complicated, and the situation is constantly changing. Even Master Mo might not be able to take care of everything, so it's safer to have a teleportation scroll. I want a scroll too. Rong Yueshan was the second to pick up a scroll. She and Xuanhuan were mortal enemies, and Liemo was not only Xuanhuan's master, but he had also been close to her in the past. Rong Yueshan wasn't sure whether the cold-faced prince would ignore her if she were in danger, just so that he could get rid of a rival for Xuanhuan. Pei Zio, Yi Qianying and Rong Yueshan all had the same thought, so they all picked up scrolls. With them taking the lead, the Northern College students also picked up scrolls. The students from the other 3 colleges also didn't think that they would receive any special attention from Liemo, so they all picked up scrolls as well. Zhuifeng didn't think that Liemo had placed him in the same group as him because he wanted to take care of him, but he also didn't think that Liemo would use this opportunity to harm him. Liemo had once told him to challenge him when he was strong enough. Although Zhui Feng hated Liemo, he trusted that he was a man of his word. I want to see what he wants to do. With this thought in mind, Zhui Feng did not raise any objections to the grouping. Alright, that's settled then. It's already dark, so let's all rest for the night. Tomorrow we'll move out according to our groups, Liemo said. The treehouse was built with 7 to 8 towering trees as the base, and was built with huge trunks and branches. The space was very large and very sturdy. After Liemo gave the order, the 30 of them split into groups and found their own corners in the treehouse to rest. Liemo stood in the middle of the treehouse and began to set up an array. He raised his hands and a dazzling white spiritual energy seeped out of his palms and fingers, then drifted into the air. The white spiritual energy floated in the air and landed in every corner of the treehouse according to some mysterious law. At the same time, the scrolls in the hands of the students also emitted a faint white spiritual energy. All of the students present stared intently at this transformation, their eyes full of admiration and yearning. Arrays were a rather mysterious existence on the Xuanhuan continent. Legend had it that all the array masters had perished in the Great War between humans and demons 1,000 years ago. As a result, there were no arrays left on the Xuanhuan continent other than Kongming Academy. After setting up the array, Liemo found a corner to rest with Yun Ruoyan and Zhui Feng. Yun Ruoyan wanted to strike up a conversation with Liemo, but with so many eyes on her, she couldn't help but avoid suspicion. As a result, the two of them began to meditate silently. Suddenly it was midnight. Yun Ruoyan was awoken by the sounds of wild beasts. She was about to get up to investigate when Liemo grabbed her by the hand. They're just some useless beasts in the forest. Don't bother with them, Liemo replied. Rest well for tomorrow's operation. Liemo pulled Yun Ruoyan into his embrace. Yun Ruoyan fell into Liemo's embrace. She looked around in the dark of the night, and only when she saw that the students were all sound asleep did she let out a sigh of relief, but her heart was still beating rapidly. Although she and Liemo often acted intimately, that was only when no one else was around. Yun Ruoyan wasn't used to such intimacy in such an environment. Although Rong Yueshan, Pei Zio, and Yi Qinying were far away, Zhui Feng wasn't far away. If someone were to find out, then the two of them would have avoided each other for nothing. Liemo quickly put me down, Yun Ruoyan whispered. Sure. Liemo placed a finger on Yun Ruoyan's lips. Close your eyes and get some rest. As soon as Liemo finished speaking, a low, strange sound rang out. The sound seemed to have some sort of hypnotic effect. Yun Ruoyan's eyes immediately closed, and she quickly fell into a dreamless sleep. The next day when she awoke, the sky was just beginning to brighten. Yun Ruoyan found herself half lying on the wooden floor. Liemo wasn't by her side, but Zhui Feng was quietly leaning against a tree trunk. Yun Ruoyan sat up. Seeing that the surrounding students were all sound asleep, she quietly crept toward the edge of the treehouse. Just as she reached the edge of the treehouse, Yun Ruoyan heard a commotion coming from below. She poked her head out of the treehouse's perimeter and focused her spiritual energy on her eyes. What she saw gave her quite a shock. On the ground beneath the treehouse, there were at least a dozen beasts lying on the ground. Each of these beasts was enormous, at least 4 or 5 times the size of the beasts on the Xuanhuan continent. Although they were lying on top of each other, there was no sign of blood or intestines, and Yun Ruoyan couldn't tell whether they were dead or alive. Yin, you're awake. Liemo's voice came from the side. Yun Ruoyan looked toward the direction of his voice and saw him perched on the branch of a nearby tree. Liemo, what's going on down there? Yun Ruoyan asked curiously. Are these beasts dead or alive? Liemo didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stepped into the air, and a green light shone from his body as he extended a hand toward Yun Ruoyan. Yun Ruoyan looked back at the treehouse. Everyone inside was still sleeping soundly, and even the usually alert Zhui Feng was abnormally fast asleep. Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but feel suspicious. Yun Ruoyan handed her hand to Liemo, and in the blink of an eye, Liemo brought her to the ground. Yun Ruoyan bent down to examine the beasts on the ground, then turned to Liemo. They're all alive. What's going on? Yun Ruoyan's suspicions deepened as she thought of the other students sleeping soundly in the treehouse. Suddenly she recalled the low, distant cry she'd heard the night before, when she'd been in Liemo's arms. Could it have been that cry? Before Yun Ruoyan could ask, Liemo explained, it's the soul-stealing bird. Soul-stealing bird? This was the first time Yun Ruoyan had heard of such a name. She thought back to some of the fragmented records of magical beasts she had read before, and vaguely recalled a section on the records called the extinct records. The extinct records were records of magical beasts that had gone extinct on the Xuanhuan continent, and the soul-stealing bird seemed to be one of them. However, Xuanhuan didn't have a clear picture of what the soul-stealing bird was. When Liemo saw the confusion on Xuanhuan's face, he explained, when a soul-stealing bird reaches adulthood, it can kill invisibly with its chirping, but the one from last night was clearly still a fledgling, so it could only hypnotize its victim. Oh, so they were all hypnotized, no wonder. No wonder they were all so soundly asleep. Then what's with these beasts? Xuanhuan asked. The wild beasts on the ground were just ordinary beasts, not magic beasts. Even if there were 2 or 3 magic beasts in the middle, their killing power was extremely weak. From this, it could be seen that they were at the edge of the forest, while the terrifying magic beasts were in the depths. Last night, I heard the sound of beasts roaring in the depths of the forest. I don't know what's going on, Liemo replied. We can go take a look. But before that, let's capture this soul-stealing bird first. Liemo told Xuanhuan that soul-stealing birds like to eat all sorts of strange flowers and plants, especially bewitching flowers. Presumably, it had been attracted by the bewitching flowers from last night. By the time they finished their conversation, the sky was already bright, but no one in the hut had moved. Liemo, on the other hand, looked delighted. Although this soul-stealing bird is still a fledgling, it's not weak at all. He struck the head of one of the smaller beasts with his spiritual energy. The wild beast suffered a blow, and its eyes suddenly opened, then slowly closed again. It was as dead as could be. Liemo dragged the dead beast to one side. This one should be enough to fill everyone's stomachs. Liemo glanced at Xuanhuan. Liemo was in a semi-inebriated state, and everything he ate depended on his mood. Xuanhuan, on the other hand, was a voracious eater. Clearly Liemo had killed this beast for her. By then the sky was even brighter, and sunlight shone into the forest through the gaps between the leaves. All the beasts that came into contact with the sunlight awoke. They crawled up and looked around in confusion. Xuanhuan and Liemo were just standing to the side, but they didn't panic when they saw them, treating them as mere weaklings. The wild beasts shifted their confused gazes away from the two of them, and continued to move forward with their thick limbs and huge bodies. In the shadows where the sunlight didn't reach, there were still a few beasts sleeping soundly. Usually, beasts that are hypnotized by a soul-stealing bird will automatically wake up after 12 hours, but the one last night was clearly much more powerful than the average one. From the looks of it, unless there's a strong light, it'll probably sleep for 2 days and 2 nights, Liemo commented. Chapter 255. Because this trial didn't have a time limit, they could cultivate for a year if they wanted to, so the two of them weren't in a rush. Liemo, I don't know why you put Zhuo Yifeng in the same group as us. Can you tell me? Xuanhuan took this opportunity to ask Liemo. Liemo was quite pleased to hear Xuanhuan refer to him as us, and he smiled. What do you think I'm doing? I don't know, Xuanhuan replied honestly. But I'm certain that you'll take care of Zhuo Yifeng. Liemo only smiled. I heard you say that he's quite good at barbecuing. If you like it so much, wouldn't I be in trouble if I didn't bring him along? Just because of that? Xuanhuan was somewhat speechless. What else do you think, Yener? Liemo smiled. Xuanhuan continued to be speechless. The two of them returned to the treehouse and brought all the students out under the sun, waking them up one by one. What's going on? Why are we lying here? The sun is so bright. What time is it now? The students who had just woken up were very confused when they saw themselves lying outside. The beasts beneath the treehouse can be used as food. Liemo didn't intend to explain the soul-stealing bird to the students. Everyone get ready. We can set off. Although the students were confused after hearing Liemo's words, they all went down to the treehouse, took some fresh meat, and dispersed according to the groups they had been assigned the night before. Liemo brought Xuanhuan and Zhuo Yifeng toward the west. Along the way, Xuanhuan told Zhuo Yifeng about the soul-stealing bird, but he didn't comment. Liemo sped up, and Xuanhuan had to focus all her attention on keeping up with him. Liemo, how did you know the soul-stealing bird was in this direction? Xuanhuan caught up to him. I don't know, Liemo replied. Then where are you taking us? To the bewitching flower's nest, Liemo said as he sped up once more. Zhuo Yifeng was still able to keep up, but Xuanhuan was starting to lag behind. Zhuo Yifeng reached out to pull Xuanhuan back, but Liemo suddenly stopped. What's wrong? Xuanhuan walked up to Liemo's side, panting. Liemo didn't even look at her. Instead he bowed slightly and said, "Come up." "Huh. Come up." "Oh." As soon as Yun Ruoyan climbed onto Li Mo's back, Li Mo sprinted away. Yun Ruoyan could feel the trees on either side of her, and the wind whistled past her ears. She couldn't help tightening her grip on Li Mo's broad shoulders. Zhui Feng didn't say a word as he followed closely behind. After about 15 minutes, Li Mo finally stopped. "Right here." Li Mo placed Yun Ruoyan down from his back. In front of Yun Ruoyan was a misty flower bed, and on top of the flower bed was a sea of purple and red flowers of various shapes and sizes. A gust of wind blew over, but it was filled with the refreshing and sweet fragrance of peach blossoms. Because she was already prepared, Yun Ruoyan wasn't bewitched this time. However, she felt Zhui Feng close his eyes and take a deep breath. At first, Yun Ruoyan was worried that Zhui Feng would be bewitched by the fragrance of the flowers. She wanted to warn him, but when Zhui Feng opened his eyes after a deep breath, Yun Ruoyan saw that his eyes were bright and clear, without the slightest hint of bewitchment. "What did you smell just now?" "I smelled the fragrance of a leafless flower," Zhui Feng replied. "When I was young, Mother planted a patch of it in our backyard. It's a fiery red color and it smells faintly fragrant." Zhui Feng closed his eyes and took another deep breath. "Shoo, quiet," Li Mo suddenly called out. Then he reached out and pulled Yun Ruoyan to hide in the bushes at the side. Yun Ruoyan tugged on Zhui Feng's sleeve, and the three of them squatted together in the bush. Just as the three of them hid, loud footsteps could be heard from afar. At the same time the ground began to tremble. The three of them simultaneously felt a powerful aura approaching from afar, and it was rushing towards them at an extremely fast speed. Li Mo, Yun Ruoyan all held their breaths and retracted their auras. Bang, bang, bang. As the tremors grew closer, the aura grew stronger and stronger, giving Yun Ruoyan the feeling that it was even stronger than the average high-rank magical beast on the Xuanhuan continent. A high-rank magical beast was equivalent to a 7th rank or 8th rank blade master, and this aura was clearly beyond that. Yun Ruoyan looked toward Li Mo, who stared intently in the direction of the tremors. Suddenly, there was a cracking sound, and several large trees in the vicinity of the flower bed had been knocked down. Then, a mountainous beast that looked like a wild boar charged out of the dense forest. Between the brows of the boar's head was a ball of fiery red fur. It was a fiery hog. Yun Ruoyan had never seen such a large, mutated fiery hog before. The largest magical beast she had seen in the imperial family's secret territory was the saber-toothed tiger, but this inferno hog was more than twice the size of the saber-toothed tiger. Yun Ruoyan's heart was filled with shock. She silently calculated in her heart what her chances of victory would be if the three of them were to fight against this mutated fire hog, but she saw that the fire hog had already pounced into the flower bed. The moment the fiery hog charged into the flower bed, the colorful bewitching flowers retracted their flowers and leaves, quickly burying themselves into the soil. In an instant, the large flower bed had become a patch of bare ground. With a loud rumbling sound, a cloud of dust rose from the white ground. It was the raging flame hog that had pounced in. This fiery hog likes to eat rotting meat. It must have been bewitched by the bewitching flowers, Li Mo murmured. Then, as if in a frenzy, the fiery hog used its nose to dig into the white ground. It must have been attracted by the smell of rotting meat, but when it didn't see any, it knew that it had been tricked. Just as the fiery hog was about to go berserk, the white ground suddenly changed. Numerous thick, sticky vines burrowed out of the ground, then fiercely stabbed at the fiery hog's body. However, the fiery hog's hide was so thick that the vines weren't able to pierce through its skin in one go. The fiery hog became even more frenzied. It opened its large mouth and bit down on one of the vines. With a fierce tug, a large clump of blood-red roots was pulled out of the ground. The fiery hog began to chomp on the roots, and the broken vines scattered in all directions as they quickly burrowed back into the soil. Just as the fiery hog was happily chewing on the roots, Yun Ruoyan saw dozens of vines burrow out of the ground around it. This time the vines didn't attack rashly. Instead, they slowly crawled along the fiery hog's limbs, belly, and the soft and vital parts of its body. Then, as if someone was directing the vines wrapped around the fiery hog's limbs tightened and bound it to the ground. Only then did the fiery hog react. It howled and struggled, but the vines around its underarms and belly suddenly tightened. Yun Ruoyan saw that the fiery hog's two round eyes seemed to be about to pop out of their sockets due to the immense pain, and large droplets of saliva dripped from the corners of its mouth. The bewitching flowers clearly didn't want to give the fiery hog any chance to struggle. Numerous more vines quickly burrowed into the fiery hog's mouth, nostrils, ears, and eye sockets. The immense pain caused the fiery hog to struggle even more violently. Most likely because of its large body, its violent movements caused it to tremble uncontrollably. But this was clearly a meaningless struggle. Fresh blood began to flow out of its 7 orifices, attracting even more vines to burrow out of the ground. In a short while, the fiery hog's entire body was tightly bound by the swarm of vines. Then, a large amount of green juice was secreted from the vines. A sizzling sound of corrosion could be heard, and large amounts of white foam seeped out from the gaps between the vines. At the same time, Xuanhuan smelled an even stronger fragrance of peach blossoms, and Zhuifeng smelled an even stronger fragrance of the leafless flowers. But combined with the scene in front of them, the two of them felt as if they were about to vomit. After about half a cup of tea's time, the rattan began to loosen, revealing the white bones of the raging flame hog inside. Just like that, the gigantic fiery hog had been eaten by the bewitching flowers, leaving behind only a skeleton. Xuanhuan couldn't help but feel a lingering fear. If she had been entangled by the vines yesterday and hadn't been able to save herself in time, she would likely have become a skeleton as well. After the vines had been eaten up, they all retracted back into the ground. Then, at a rapid pace, a patch of purple and red flowers bloomed on the white ground. However, Xuanhuan no longer felt that the flowers were beautiful, only terrifying and eerie. "What a frightening flower," Xuanhuan couldn't help exclaiming. "The seeds of the bewitching flower are the best ingredient for refining it." Xiaoqiu, who hadn't spoken for a long time, suddenly spoke up in Xuanhuan's mind. Xiaoqiu had once taught Xuanhuan how to refine a bewitching fog that could confuse people, but due to the limitations of the materials used, it could only confuse cultivators below 6th rank. If she wanted to confuse higher-ranked cultivators, she needed better ingredients, and the seeds of the bewitching flower were an excellent example. "I'm afraid it won't be easy to obtain," Xuanhuan replied. "Mistress, I can sense that the bewitching flower's natural predator is nearby," Xiaoqiu added. "Be careful, the soul-stealing bird is here," Liamo whispered. "Mistress, look east," Xiaoqiu reminded. Xuanhuan looked toward the east, only to see a large bird with silver-gray feathers, golden eyes, and a long beak flying through the branches of the trees. "Cover your ears." Liamo and Xiaoqiu's voices rang out at almost the same time. Xuanhuan and Zhuifeng immediately covered their ears, and even Liamo did the same. As soon as the three of them did so, a low, melodious chirp rang out. Chapter 256. Although Xuanhuan had covered her ears, she could still hear the soul-stealing bird's cries, and she couldn't help but feel a little dizzy. Liamo placed a finger on Xuanhuan's temple, infusing her with spiritual energy, clearing her mind. At the same time, Liamo placed a finger on Zhuifeng's temple, and Zhuifeng's hazy eyes brightened once more. Zhuifeng glanced sideways at Liamo, who retracted his hand. "Be careful. Don't fall for its tricks." Zhuifeng expressionlessly turned his gaze back to the flower beds. Above the flower beds, the soul-stealing bird circled incessantly, its low cries continuing. Liamo was almost unaffected, and both Xuanhuan and Zhuifeng were using their spiritual energy to protect their minds. The bewitching flowers in the flower beds were clearly affected. Although they had sensed danger and revealed their vines, they were now flailing about wildly, without the slightest hint of their previous composure. The soul-stealing bird was more than 3 times the size of a giant eagle, but even so, it was still very small compared to the flaming hog. The soul-stealing bird dodged the dozens of vines with great agility. Suddenly, its eyes lit up, and it dodged a few vines before stabbing at a bright red bewitching flower. The soul-stealing bird was very fast, and it quickly retrieved a red bewitching flower from its bewitching flower before quickly retreating. "That's a bewitching flower seed," Xiaoqiu exclaimed. Xuanhuan stared at the seed in the bird's beak. As it flew, it raised its head and swallowed the bewitching flower. As for the bewitching flower that had lost its seed, it began to wilt at a rate visible to the naked eye. After eating the seed, the soul-stealing bird became extremely excited and let out another cry. This time it was even longer than the previous cry. "Mistress, be careful. Every time the bird eats a bewitching flower seed, its soul-stealing ability will increase by a fraction," Xiaoqiu reminded. Because of Xiaoqiu's reminder, Xuanhuan was able to reinforce the spiritual energy protecting her mind, but Zhuifeng, who was caught off guard, fell unconscious. Zhuifeng. Xuanhuan tried to wake him up. "It's no use. He'll sleep for at least 16 hours this time, Liamo said. While the two of them were talking, the soul-stealing bird had already eaten 2 or 3 of the bewitching flower seeds. Sure enough, with each seed it ate, the soul-stealing bird's power would increase. After 2 chirps, Xuanhuan couldn't take it anymore, but the soul-stealing bird was getting more and more excited. Hold on a little longer, Liamo urged as he transferred spiritual energy into her body. When the soul-stealing bird ate the 7th bewitching flower seed, another change occurred. An abnormally thick rattan suddenly emerged from the center of the flower bed and swung at the soul-stealing bird. The soul-stealing bird narrowly dodged the attack, but a few of its feathers were shaved off by the rattan. Following that, behind the thick vine, a huge flower with multicolored petals drilled out. The brood mother. Xiaoqiu and Liamo cried out simultaneously. Even without Liamo and Xiaoqiu's explanation, Xuanhuan could tell that the brood mother was the leader of the bewitching flowers. The soul-stealing bird had destroyed 6 or 7 bewitching flowers in a row, and the leader was finally going to get angry. Every bird that wants to mature has to eat a seed from the brood mother, Liamo explained. I've wanted to tame an adult soul-stealing bird many times, and this time I've finally gotten my chance. The vines of the bewitching mother flower continued to chase after the soul-stealing bird. Although it looked thick and clumsy, its movements were abnormally fast. Coupled with the pincer attacks of the other soul-stealing vines, the soul-stealing bird began to panic. Stay here and protect yourself, Liamo said as he dashed toward the flower bed. At the same time, a green sword aura appeared beneath Liamo's feet, and he flew into the midst of the vines. Liamo, be careful. When Xuanhuan saw how many vines Liamo was entangled in, she couldn't help but cry out. Liamo used the fingers of his right hand as a sword, and a dazzling white spiritual energy shimmered at his fingertips. He swung his right hand, chopping off the vines that were attacking him as if he were chopping vegetables. Then he cast a fireball with his left hand and turned the vines that he had cut into ashes in midair. Without a pincer attack, the soul-stealing bird began to fight with the brood mother, its long sharp beak pecking at the vines whenever an opportunity presented itself. The vines secreted a corrosive green liquid, but it had no effect on the soul-stealing bird's long hard beak. While the soul-stealing bird and bewitching flower were engaged in battle, Liamo had slaughtered his way to the bewitching mother flower. Xuanhuan saw Liamo stretch out his hands toward the center of the brood mother's flower. White spiritual energy seeped out of his palms, forming a white, cylindrical whirlwind that burrowed into the brood mother's flower. At the same time, the vines of the brood mother sensed danger and quickly retreated toward Liamo's back. At the same time, the brood mother's petals shrank back into the soil. Liamo turned around and used a fireball technique with one hand, sending a large fireball hurtling toward the vines. At the same time, his other hand continued to use the whirlwind to plunder the brood mother's flower seeds. Xuanhuan's jaw dropped. She'd seen Liamo use a spiritual whirlwind before, and she'd also seen him use a fireball technique, but this was the first time she'd seen him use both at the same time. It was rare for most people to be able to use even one type of elemental spiritual energy, but Liamo was able to use both at the same time. As Liamo continued to use fireballs to keep the vines at bay, he increased the strength of his whirlwind to plunder the brood mother's flower seeds. Just as Xuanhuan was in shock, Liamo slowly plucked out a multicolored pearl from the brood mother's flower and held it tightly in his hand. In an instant, both the brood mother and its vines withered, and the withering spread rapidly from the brood mother. In no time at all, the large flower bed had withered into a wasteland. Liamo slowly raised the colorful flower seed in his hand toward the bird in the air. Submit to me and the seed is yours, Liamo shouted at the brood mother. The brood mother's blood-red eyes seemed to turn even redder. With a shrill caw, it charged toward Liamo. Liamo directed the sword beneath his feet to dodge the attack. That caw made Xuanhuan feel as if a needle of ice had pierced into her brain. She felt a sharp pain, and her brain felt as if it had been filled with ice water, causing her to tremble violently. Then, his slightly muddled mind instantly became extremely clear. Arg! Zhui Feng, who had also been affected by the brood mother's caw, cried out in pain and woke up with a frown. He flipped over and stood up, but Xuanhuan pressed him down. Don't move. Look over there, Xuanhuan said, pointing to the sky. Zhui Feng looked up, only to see Liamo facing off against the giant brood mother. The brood mother knew that its caw would have no effect on Liamo, so it chose to use a caw that would damage his brain and clear his mind. This time it wasn't Liamo who was injured, but rather Zhui Feng and Xuanhuan. The two of them desperately covered their ears to prevent the sound from piercing their brains. In midair, Liemo flew toward the baby soul-stealing bird, facing the sound waves head-on. When the young bird saw this, it couldn't help but jump in fright, and its cries came to an abrupt halt. In the blink of an eye, Liemo arrived in front of the broodmother and mounted its back. At first, the broodmother struggled violently, but Liemo would occasionally strike its eyes with spiritual energy. At first, the broodmother's eyes were as red as blood, but they slowly lost their color and turned brown. The broodmother's struggling finally slowed, and it slowly landed on the ground. Liemo jumped off the broodmother's back, and Xuanhuan ran over excitedly. "It's done." Liemo smiled at Xuanhuan. Xuanhuan smiled like a blossoming flower as she reached out to stroke the broodmother's head. The broodmother dodged, but it suddenly let out a caw, causing both Xuanhuan and Zhuifeng to cry out in pain. The two of them clutched their heads for a long time before the pain and coldness finally subsided. "This bird's amazing." Xuanhuan frowned slightly, but she didn't dare to stroke it again. Take this." Liemo handed the bewitching broodmother's seed to Xuanhuan. Xuanhuan looked at the seed, which was round and emitted a colorful glow. It was very cute and she reached out to take it. "If you make a bewitching potion with this, even Liemo might fall unconscious," Xiao exclaimed in Xuanhuan's mind. Feed the seed to the soul-stealing bird," Liemo instructed. "It'll be closer to you in the future." "All right." Xuanhuan turned to the broodmother. As soon as it saw the seed in Xuanhuan's hand, its feathers trembled in excitement. It opened its beak slightly, and it let out a series of cawing noises, as if it were whispering to one another, or as if it were a child begging for food. "In the future, be good and don't make such frightening sounds." Xuanhuan extended her hand, and the broodmother obediently placed its head under her palm. Xuanhuan patted its head lightly, and the broodmother squinted its eyes fawningly. "All right, here you go." Xuanhuan placed the bewitching flower seed by the soul-stealing bird's beak. The broodmother eagerly opened its mouth and sucked Xuanhuan's entire arm into its mouth. "Ruoyan." Zhuifeng, who had been standing behind Xuanhuan, hurriedly tried to pull her back, but Liemo blocked him. Xuanhuan's arm was in the broodmother's mouth, but she didn't feel any pain. Instead, she felt the broodmother's soft tongue curl around her arm, tickling her. She loosened her grip, and the broodmother's soft tongue swallowed the seed. After swallowing the seed, the broodmother immediately let go of Xuanhuan's arm, raised its head and was about to caw. Xuanhuan covered her ears in fright, but the broodmother didn't make a sound. Instead, it leapt off the ground with both feet and soared into the sky. Xuanhuan looked up to see that the broodmother had broken through a corner of the tree's canopy that covered half the sky. Blinding sunlight shone in, forming a colorful pillar of light. "Liemo," Xuanhuan murmured, "will it come back?" Chapter 257. After eating the bewitching flower seeds, Xuanhuan couldn't help but worry that it wouldn't return. "Liemo, will it come back?" Xuanhuan asked Liemo. Before Liemo could respond, a clear, melodious chirp came from the sky. Xuanhuan raised her head and saw a palm-sized shadow flying closer and closer to the multicolored pillar of light. The shadow stopped not far from Xuanhuan. It was a small, adorable bird with reddish-brown eyes, a long, pointed beak and silver-white feathers. "What is it?" Xuanhuan stared at Liemo in disbelief. "It's the soul-stealing bird," Liemo replied. "Once a soul-stealing bird reaches adulthood, it can take on two forms. One is larger and it's more suited for combat." "How adorable." Xuanhuan couldn't help reaching out to the palm-sized soul-stealing bird. The soul-stealing bird obediently perched on Xuanhuan's palm. "Is it your magical beast now?" As she played with the soul-stealing bird, she turned to Liemo and asked, "Why don't I see you forming a contract with it?" "It's not qualified to form a contract with me, and it's only temporarily under my command." Liemo smiled at her. You fed it the seed of the bewitching broodmother flower to help it mature, and now it recognizes you as its half-master." As if in response to Liemo's words, the soul-stealing bird cackled twice. "Mistress," Xiao called out. "It doesn't like you calling it a soul-stealing bird, so it wants you to give it a name." Xiao called out in Xuanhuan's mind. Xuanhuan looked at the bird in her palm and smiled. "You want me to give you a name?" The soul-stealing bird chirped twice in Xuanhuan's palm. "All right." Xuanhuan thought for a moment, then glanced at Liemo and smiled. "I'll call you Emo, all right?" "No." Liemo frowned. Cluck, cluck, cluck. The soul-stealing bird was very fond of this name, and it flew around Xuanhuan excitedly. From now on you'll be called Little Murphy. Little Murphy, hee hee. The girl's bell-like laughter echoed through the forest. Liemo shook his head and sighed, a bitter smile on his lips. Yinner's getting bolder and bolder. I'm afraid she'll one day climb all over my head. Zhuifeng stood silently to the side, watching the girl play with the bird. He also looked at the slaughtering king, who had a deep grudge against him and only knew a little about him from the mouths of others. Ever since he was young, he had always imagined the slaughtering king to be a demon who killed without batting an eyelid. In Zhuifeng's childhood nightmares, Liemo would chop off the heads of his tribesmen one by one with a blood-stained blade, then approach him with a sinister smile. Every time Zhuifeng awoke from those nightmares, he would be drenched in sweat. But at this moment, the murderous demon in Zhuifeng's mind, the one who had always been Zhuifeng's nightmare, was smiling helplessly at a young girl. Zhuifeng couldn't help feeling a little dazed. Zhuifeng, what are you daydreaming about? Xuanhuan's voice suddenly interrupted Zhuifeng's train of thought. Where are we going next? Zhuifeng asked, startled. First, let's go get some bewitching flower seeds. Xuanhuan began walking toward the flower bed where the bewitching flowers had once grown. Although the bewitching flowers had all withered, their seeds were still in the soil, and the three of them quickly collected quite a few seeds. Dug around in the soil, eating to its heart's content. Xuanhuan had heard from Qiuqiu that every time ate a bewitching flower seed, the power of its voice would increase by a fraction. Xuanhuan had experienced this firsthand. As she watched eat its seeds, she couldn't help but feel a little curious. She asked Qiuqiu how strong it would become if it continued eating. Qiuqiu told her that once the soul-stealing bird matured, the bewitching flower seeds would no longer have any effect on it, and was only eating them out of greed. As soon as Qiuqiu finished speaking, Xuanhuan heard Liemo stop don't be so ruthless. Liemo turned to Xuanhuan. You're almost done with your collection. Leave some seeds for the bewitching flower. Xuanhuan saw that they had collected about 15 seeds, which, according to Qiuqiu, could be used to make quite a few high-grade bewitching pills. She nodded in agreement. Where are we going now? Xuanhuan asked Liemo the same question Zhuifeng had asked her. As Xuanhuan spoke, a rumbling sound came from her stomach. Liemo and Zhuifeng both turned to look at her. Xuanhuan was already used to it, and she didn't feel embarrassed at all. She turned to Zhuifeng. Let's get something to eat first. The three of them found a place with water. Zhuifeng started a fire, took out some fresh beast meat, and smeared it with special spices. Liemo, on the other hand, took out a small bottle of wine and sat by the side, sipping from it. Over the fire, the bright red meat slowly turned brown, and the aroma of the meat mixed with the spices grew stronger and stronger. It smells so good. Xuanhuan couldn't help leaning closer to Zhuifeng. This aroma is different from before. Zhuifeng, not only has your cultivation improved, but your barbecuing skills have improved as well. During this period of time, Zhuifeng had spent a great deal of time and effort on barbecuing in order to capture the stomach of the black-clothed man who had taught him. The spices he was currently using had been developed not long ago. The corners of Zhuifeng's mouth curled into a smile, then he continued to turn the skewers in his hands to ensure that every part of the meat was evenly heated. This way the meat would be crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. Liemo here. Xuanhuan handed the first piece of meat that Zhuifeng had roasted to Liemo, somewhat fawningly. Liemo had made her half a master of and it was only right for her to reciprocate his kindness. As a result, she had no choice but to do so. Liemo's eyes were drooping as he drank his wine, but he didn't take it. It's really good. Try it, it's not any worse than the fish you roasted, Xuanhuan commented. Liemo glanced sideways at Xuanhuan, who continued to smile fawningly. Liemo stretched out 2 fingers, using spiritual energy as a knife, and sliced off a piece of meat from Xuanhuan's hand. He pinched it between his fingers and placed it in his mouth, but he only took a small bite. How is it? Xuanhuan asked expectantly, as if she were the one who had roasted the meat. Liemo swallowed the meat in his mouth and replied coolly, not bad. He then whistled into the air and chirped in response. In the blink of an eye, it appeared in front of Liemo. Liemo fed the rest of the meat in his hand to which it swallowed in one gulp, seemingly wanting more. You're too picky. Is much easier to feed, Xuanhuan commented. Then one by one they shared a good piece of meat with On the other hand, Li Mo's face darkened. After a hearty meal, Yun Ruoyan wiped her mouth and asked Li Mo about their next course of action. Zhui Feng cupped his fists and leaned against the trunk of a large tree. His gaze wandered in a random direction, but his ears were pointed in Li Mo's direction. Both you and Zhui Feng need actual combat, Li Mo began. We're currently on the outskirts of the forest, so there won't be any particularly powerful magical beasts. If we want to engage in actual combat with powerful beasts, we'll have to head east into the heart of the forest. Wasn't that fire hog a high-rank magical beast? Zhui Feng asked. It was attracted by the bewitching flower. Now that it's been destroyed, there won't be any more high-rank magical beasts attracted by it in the short term, Li Mo replied. In that case, let's set off right away, Yun Ruoyan exclaimed. The three of them walked quickly toward the heart of the forest for more than 2 hours. Suddenly they heard another tremor in front of them. That trembling sound was even louder than the raging flame hog's movement. Even the huge treetops of the giant tree were rattling from the trembling. Yun Ruoyan and Zhui Feng hadn't had much experience fighting magical beasts, and they were in an alternate dimension, where the beasts were much larger than those on the Xuanhuan continent. Even with Li Mo by their side, the presence of an unknown magical beast still made their faces pale. Just then Xiao told Yun Ruoyan that the beast's aura wasn't very strong, and that Yun Ruoyan didn't need to worry. As soon as Xiao finished speaking, the beast broke through several giant trees and appeared in front of the three of them. Yun Ruoyan could see that it was a bull-shaped beast as large as a small mountain. If one were to gouge out its eyes, they could use them as full-body mirrors. His 2 shiny horns were even more frightening. With a slight twist of his head, the sunlight that shone down from the treetops was reflected by the pair of horns, dazzling everyone's eyes. Let's go. Zhui Feng reached behind him and took out a tiger fang scissor and knocked it on his bow. There's no need, Li Mo, who was standing behind Yun Ruoyan and Zhui Feng, interjected. Yin can deal with them on her own. Yun Ruoyan turned to frown at Li Mo, unable to hide the shock in her eyes. It wasn't that Yun Ruoyan was timid, but that the beast in front of her was so frightening that she had never encountered anything like it before. What, Yin, are you scared? Li Mo smiled. Yun Ruoyan knew that Li Mo was trying to goad her into action, but she quickly hid the shock in her eyes and smiled coolly. This beast is quite scary, but once I kill it, there won't be anything to be afraid of. Yun Ruoyan bent down to retrieve the dark steel dagger strapped to her thigh, gathered spiritual energy under her feet, and leaped toward the beast. Zhui Feng, on the other hand, was still aiming his arrow at the beast's vitals, ready to fire at any moment. As a peak 7th rank blade master, Yun Ruoyan could leap more than 30 feet into the air. However, the beast was 40 feet tall, so Yun Ruoyan couldn't leap onto its back to attack. In midair, the bull-headed beast swung its head at Yun Ruoyan, slashing at her with its shiny horns. With a flip of her body, Yun Ruoyan lightly stepped on the bull's horn and flipped herself onto the beast's head. The bull-headed beast shook its head wildly, but Yun Ruoyan stabbed her dagger into its forehead. Although the beast's bones were hard, like most magical beasts, there was a small gap between the 2 bones of its forehead. Yun Ruoyan's dark steel dagger accurately pierced through that gap. However, the dark steel dagger was too short. It couldn't kill the giant bull. The giant bull became even crazier after being hit in its vitals. Yun Ruoyan gripped her dagger tightly as her body was flung into the air. Chapter 258. Zhui Feng was just about to shoot an arrow to help Yun Ruoyan when he heard Li Mo's voice from behind. If you can't even deal with a low-rank beast like this on your own, then there's no need to venture into the forest. When Zhui Feng saw that Yun Ruoyan wasn't in any danger, and when he heard Li Mo's words, he loosened his grip on the arrow. Yun Ruoyan, on the other hand, was feeling rather helpless. Although this beast wasn't as strong or intelligent as the low-rank beasts on the Xuanhuan continent, its massive body and brute strength were still something to be reckoned with. Mistress, this beast's body is huge and its skin is thick and coarse. If you want to kill it, you'll have to extract its beast core. Xiaoqiu's voice rang out in Yun Ruoyan's mind. I know. Yun Ruoyan replied. But the problem is that I can't move at all. Yun Ruoyan was clutching her dagger tightly in one hand and a handful of yellow fur on the bull's head in the other. She felt as if she were a leaf hanging from the trunk of a tree, and the slightest loosening of her grip would send her flying. This bull must be in so much pain that it's using its brute strength, Xiaoqiu explained. If you pull out the dagger, it'll definitely think that you've been flung away. Alright, I'll try. Yun Ruoyan gripped tightly on the bull's head with one hand and yanked the dagger out with the other. Yun Ruoyan complained incessantly. This bull is really too barbaric, Xiao thought to herself. Liemo summoned his sword of azure light and leapt into the air to follow behind the bull. Zhuo Yifeng slung his bow on his back and followed closely behind. Lime's hands were clasped behind his back as he stood on his sword, following by Yun Ruoyan's side. He didn't seem to have the slightest intention of helping her. Yun Ruoyan didn't intend to call for help either. She didn't believe that a peak 7th rank blade master like her wouldn't be able to deal with a bull like this. If she wanted to kill the bull, she would have to extract its beast core. Yun Ruoyan stuck close to the bull's head as she moved toward the spot where she had stabbed her dagger. Then she raised her dagger and stabbed it into the bull's skull once more. The bull once more went berserk from the pain, shaking its head as it galloped. Yun Ruoyan gritted her teeth, raised her hand and stabbed the bull in the same direction 3 or 4 times in a row. Liemo finally nodded approvingly when he saw Yun Ruoyan's actions. By Yun Ruoyan's 6th stab, a fist-sized hole had appeared in the bull's skull. Yun Ruoyan peered into the hole and saw a brownish-yellow beast core, about the size of an adult's head, just below the skull. Yun Ruoyan reached her hand into the hole. However, her arm and hand as well as the hole she made with the black iron dagger, were too small compared to the inner core of the giant bull. It was almost impossible to take out the inner core. After a moment of hesitation, Yun Ruoyan decided that since she couldn't extract it, she would have to destroy it. As soon as Yun Ruoyan thought of this, she immediately used a fireball technique, condensing fire-attuned spiritual energy into a fireball in the palm of her hand. Then she threw the fireball at the bull's beast core. The bull's beast core looked very large, but as soon as it was struck by Yun Ruoyan's fireball, it trembled violently. A giant tree was broken by the crash of the giant cow. Before the broken branches hit the cow's head, Yun Ruoyan had already nimbly jumped from the cow's head to the trunk of another giant tree, and then found another opportunity to quickly jump back onto the cow's head. After a while the bull finally slowed down. Yun Ruoyan stood on the bull's head with one leg hooked around its horns, and she shot fireballs at the hole in the bull's head with both hands. The fist-sized hole was blasted into a huge hole. The fireball entered the hole and directly hit the bull's nadan. After a few rounds of bombardment, a crack finally appeared on the brownish-yellow inner dan, which was the size of an adult head. By the time Yun Ruoyan threw out her 8th fireball, the beast core finally shattered. Yun Ruoyan stood on the bull's head, her body tilting as the bull fell. She looked around trying to find a place to land. Suddenly she felt her body lighten, and Liemo hugged her by the waist. Yun Ruoyan turned to the person behind her and smiled. "How's that? This little bull is still not this young lady's opponent." Liemo looked at Yun Ruoyan, whose forehead was covered in a thin layer of sweat. He shook his head. "You're still inexperienced. If you encounter a beast that's all brute strength and no thought process, there's no need to hesitate. Just attack its beast core directly." By this time Zhuo Yifeng had also rushed over. When he saw the bull lying on the ground he couldn't help but click his tongue. It really was too big. "Zhuo Yifeng, let's see if you can refine those bull horns into arrowheads." Yun Ruoyan and Liemo descended from midair. Yun Ruoyan walked over to Zhuo Yifeng's side. The bull's beast core had been destroyed, and it was no longer breathing. However, its eyes were wide open, reflecting Yun Ruoyan and Zhuo Yifeng's silhouettes. Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but step forward and touch the bull's eyeball. It felt smooth and comfortable to the touch. "Mistress, there's a membrane on the bull's eyeball. You can remove it and it might prove useful in the future," Xiao suggested. "All right." Yun Ruoyan took out her dark steel dagger and used the tip of the dagger to make a small incision around the bull's eyeball. Then she gently removed a transparent membrane from the bull's eye. "It's beautiful." Yun Ruoyan couldn't help but exclaim at the translucent film in her hand. "It's indeed very beautiful." Liemo had appeared behind Yun Ruoyan at some point. With a flip of his hand he took out a jade box. "You can store the membrane in here for safekeeping." Yun Ruoyan took the jade box, folded the membrane and placed it inside. Then she walked over to the other bull's eye and used the same method to remove the membrane from the other bull's eye. Yun Ruoyan stowed the jade box into her pocket dimension, which was just enough to fill up the 2 eye masks. With a flip of her hand she stored the box in her bracelet. As soon as Yun Ruoyan was done, she heard a loud bang from the other side of the room. As it turned out, Zhuo Yifeng had leapt onto the bull's head and used his bowstring to easily cut off one of its horns. The horn fell to the ground and smashed a large hole in the ground. "It looks impressive, but why is it so fragile?" Yun Ruoyan wondered. "This bull's horn really isn't a high-grade material," Liamo said as he glanced at the bow in Limo's hands. Liamo glanced at the bow in Limo's hands. But normal weapons won't be able to cut through it so easily. Limo's bow, like your dagger, is made of dark steel, and its string is extremely thin, which is why it can cut through metal like it's mud. The bull's horn couldn't be used as an arrowhead, so it could only be discarded. Come over here. Liamo also leapt onto the bull's head and called out to Xuanhuan. Xuanhuan gathered spiritual energy beneath her feet and leapt to Limo's side. Next to them was the crater that Xuanhuan had blasted open. Liamo motioned for Xuanhuan to look into the crater. Xuanhuan looked suspiciously into the crater, and to her delight, she saw a yellowish-brown bead in the same position as the bull's beast core that she had just destroyed. Is this the bull's core? Xuanhuan asked. Liamo nodded. Your strength isn't enough to completely destroy the bull's beast core. All that's left is the bull's core, and it's even more valuable than a low-rank beast's core. Liamo reached toward the crater, and the yellowish-brown bead flew into his hand. This is an Earth attribute beast core and it can't be used as a pill. It's useless to either of you, so I'll keep it. Liamo tucked the bead away. Xuanfeng jumped off the bull's head and walked up to its mouth. The bull's mouth was half open and half of its tongue was sticking out. Xuanfeng used the bowstring to peel off the tongue's skin, leaving behind only a large piece of tender flesh. Dinner was finally ready. The three of them continued to advance towards the giant forest. After walking for about 4 hours, the sky darkened. There wasn't a single ray of moonlight in the forest, so the three of them decided to set up camp under a large tree. Xuanfeng wrapped the tongue in tree leaves, buried it in the soil and roasted it for dinner. As she ate the fragrant tongue, which melted in her mouth, she thought to herself, Liamo really had foresight. Chapter 259. The two of them stared at the night sky for a while, breathing in the fresh air, before Liamo brought Xuanhuan to find a place to rest. You're not planning to let me sleep here, are you? Xuanhuan stared at the object in front of her in surprise. It was a large bird's nest in the middle of a large tree. What, you don't like it? Liamo dispelled the green light beneath his feet and brought Xuanhuan into the nest. No, not at all. Xuanhuan waved her hands and smiled. It's just too surprising. This nest is way too big. Xuanhuan estimated that the nest was more than 3 meters wide, and because it was circular, it was even larger. She really didn't know how big a bird would need such a large nest. Like a child, Xuanhuan hopped up and down on the nest, the soft twigs very bouncy. This is the nest of a night owl. It sleeps during the day and is active at night, so we'll use its nest to rest for the night, Liamo explained. Night owl? Xuanhuan said worriedly, the name sounds really powerful. Will it suddenly come back at night when we're asleep? No, it won't. No, it won't. Liamo had already laid down in the nest. Even if it does come back, I won't be afraid. Is that so? Xuanhuan hugged her knees as she sat down by Liamo's side. Are you saying that you won't sleep, and that you'll be keeping watch for me all night? There's someone keeping watch, but it won't be me, Liamo replied. He whistled and the bird's cry echoed in the distance. Oh, I almost forgot about Emoer, Xuanhuan laughed. Emoer's low cry had knocked out a dozen wild beasts, so what was there to fear from a single night owl? Not long after, a silver-feathered Xiao flew over from afar and stopped at the edge of the nest, his beady eyes blinking as he looked at Xuanhuan. Xuanhuan hadn't seen Mo for the entire afternoon, and now that she saw it, she couldn't help but reach out to play with it. Where did you go? I slaughtered a giant bull this afternoon, and Xuanfeng roasted its tongue tonight. It was so delicious that I almost swallowed my own tongue. It's a pity that you weren't around. Xiaomo's mouth twitched. Xuanhuan rubbed her finger against his beak. Clearly able to understand Xuanhuan's words, Mo hopped around the edge of the nest, looking very regretful. Don't tease this stupid bird anymore. Liamo sat up and leaned against the edge of the nest, as lazy as Xuanhuan had ever seen him. His long black hair was combed behind his back, revealing his jade-like face. There was a smile at the corner of his mouth as he took out a small wine pot and sipped on it. Liamo wasn't drunk, but his long, slender eyes were subconsciously tinged with alcohol. Xuanhuan stared at Liamo in a daze for a moment before Mo's protesting chirps snapped her out of her reverie. All right, Xuanhuan replied. I'm half your master after all. Why wouldn't I leave something delicious for you? As Xuanhuan spoke, she took out a bag of ox tongue wrapped in leaves and fed it piece by piece to Mo. After feeding it a whole bag, Mo let out a loud burp, causing Yun Ruoyan to giggle. Li Mo's long arms wrapped around the girl's waist, pulling her into his embrace. Yun Ruoyan didn't resist until Li Mo pressed her under his body and started kissing her forehead, the tip of her nose and the corner of her mouth, all the way to her neck. Li Mo, you promised me that before I turn marriageable, Yun Ruoyan panted. After this year I'll turn marriageable next year. Li Mo continued kissing her. During this training I'll make sure you become an 8th rank blade master, and before we enter the alternate dimension I'll marry you. I really can't wait. Although Li Mo said this, he still stopped in the end. Even though his desire for Yun Ruoyan had reached its peak, he still had to wait. Li Mo was currently a peak 9th rank blade master. As long as Yun Ruoyan's cultivation reached the peak of 8th rank, Li Mo would be able to mate with her. By then Yun Ruoyan's body would be able to help him break through the bottleneck of 9th rank and become a sword saint. By then he would be able to bring Yun Ruoyan into the alternate dimension, and their chances of returning safely would greatly increase. As a result, during this training Yun Ruoyan's cultivation was of the utmost importance. I've heard that if you can't increase your cultivation through the training, you can eat a spiritual pill that can, Yun Ruoyan replied. That's just pulling a seedling up to help it grow, and it'll only be detrimental to your cultivation in the future. I won't let you eat that, Li Mo replied. Do you know why I chose this forest? I don't know, Yun Ruoyan replied curiously. Is there another reason? Of course. Yun Ruoyan nodded. Is there another reason? Of course. More than a year ago I brought a group of students here for training. At that time, I discovered a heavenly spirit fruit in the center of the forest. However, it wasn't ripe at the time and there were quite a few high-rank beasts guarding it, so I didn't dare to act rashly. However, I've calculated the time well, and the heavenly spirit fruit will ripen this month. When the time comes I'll bring it for you so that your cultivation won't improve. The heavenly spirit fruit. Yun Ruoyan couldn't help exclaiming, is that the legendary spiritual fruit that can help a cultivator break through any bottleneck? Yes, that's the one, Li Mo replied. However, legends are usually inaccurate. The heavenly spirit fruit can indeed help a cultivator break through bottlenecks, but it's not very effective for 9th rank cultivators to reach the peak of 9th rank. Another condition is that the cultivator must have a certain level of foundation in cultivation. For those without any spiritual energy at all, it's also ineffective. So there must be many 9th rank magical beasts guarding the heavenly spirit fruit. They're also waiting for the fruit to ripen, aren't they? Yun Ruoyan asked. Don't worry, Yin. I'm more than capable of dealing with a few 9th rank beasts, Li Mo replied nonchalantly. However, Yun Ruoyan knew that it wouldn't be easy to deal with 9th rank beasts in this forest of giant trees. She had to expend a lot of energy and spiritual energy to deal with the ox-headed beast, which was only 6th rank. Yun Ruoyan didn't even dare to imagine how big a 9th rank beast would be. Don't worry about me. Don't I have that stupid bird to help me? Li Mo whispered into Yun Ruoyan's ear. Yun Ruoyan looked toward the edge of the bird's nest. At some point, Xiao Mo had buried his head in his wings and fallen asleep. Yun Ruoyan, exhausted from a long day of running around, fell into a deep, dreamless sleep in Li Mo's arms. In her dreams, Yun Ruoyan could vaguely hear a rumbling sound. She frowned and opened her eyes. The rumbling came from below. Yun Ruoyan wanted to get up, but Li Mo hugged her tightly. It's just a herd of beasts passing by. Don't worry, go back to sleep. Yun Ruoyan turned around and saw him, pulling its head out from under its wings. Its long, sharp beak opened wide, and it yawned loudly before burying its head back into its nest. Yun Ruoyan let out a light breath, relaxed and snuggled back into Li Mo's embrace. Li Mo tightened his grip on Yun Ruoyan's waist. You don't have to be so vigilant around me. Yun Ruoyan closed her eyes and snuggled deeper into Li Mo's embrace. Drowsiness washed over her once more and she drifted off to sleep once more. In her dreams, Yun Ruoyan floated into a secluded valley. Where am I? Yun Ruoyan stood by a lake in the valley and looked around. She was surrounded by green mountains and clear waters, birds chirping and the fragrance of flowers. You may. A clear male voice suddenly called out from afar. Yun Ruoyan turned in the direction of the voice. On a small path in the valley, a man dressed in coarse hemp clothes was striding toward her. The man was tall and slender, with a head of jet black hair tied neatly behind his head with a hemp rope. He had a handsome face, sword-like eyebrows and a pair of sharp, bright eyes. He walked toward Yun Ruoyan with a warm smile on his face. You may. Yun Ruoyan repeated the name that the man had just called out. How do you know my mother's name? Who are you? The man ignored Yun Ruoyan's presence and walked right past her. Yun Ruoyan hurriedly turned back to ask, Hey, who the hell are you? As soon as she asked the question, Yun Ruoyan noticed that a thatched hut had appeared by the lake not far behind her. The man called out, I'm back. I've hunted a wild pheasant today and I'll cook some soup for you later. As he walked toward the thatched hut, Yun Ruoyan's heart began to pound. Yun Ruoyan's heart suddenly began to pound, and she hurried to catch up to him. Just as the man approached the hut, the door suddenly opened and a woman dressed like a village woman walked out of the hut. The woman wore a linen headscarf, which was commonly worn by peasant women. She wore a coarse cloth dress and an apron was tied around her waist. Under the apron he had a pot-bellied posture. Even though she was dressed like a village woman, Yun Ruoyan still recognized her as her mother, Lin Yueme. Yun Ruoyan stopped walking and looked at the man and woman chatting and laughing. Long Yin, you're so hot, come wipe your sweat. Lin Yueme took out a handkerchief from her waist and wiped the sweat off the man's forehead. Yueme, look. The man showed the pheasant to Lin Yueme. I'll go clean it up and make some soup for you tonight. It'll be good for you and my good Yenner, Long Yin said as he carried the pheasant to the lakeside and began to clean it up. Lin Yueme stood behind him and smiled. How do you know it's going to be a girl? If it's going to be a boy, I'm sure he wouldn't want a name as feminine as Yen. Yueme, I won't be wrong. Our child will definitely be as pretty as you. She'll definitely like the name I'll give her, Long Yen. Long Yen, that's a really nice name. Lin Yueme smiled happily. Long Yen Long Yen Long Yen Yun Ruoyan couldn't help repeating the name. Yen wake up Yen. Li Mo's voice rang out by Yun Ruoyan's ear. Yun Ruoyan opened her eyes and Li Mo's face appeared in front of her. And you're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.